Before we begin tonight, you do not need to stay awake for this. That might seem like a strange thing to say at the start of a video, but this is not that kind of video. There is no test at the end, no action steps, no moment where I will ask you to do anything at all. Tonight, we are going to talk about something your body already knows, perhaps better than your mind does. We are going to talk about muscle tension, not as a problem to solve, not as a condition to treat, but as a language. A quiet language your body has been speaking all day, in the way your jaw holds a conversation that ended hours ago, in the way your shoulders carry the weight of a Tuesday afternoon meeting, in the way your hands still grip a steering wheel that is no longer there. There are 100 facts here tonight. 100 quiet reminders about the muscles that have been working for you. Sometimes without your permission. Always without complaint. And perhaps, as you listen, some of those muscles might decide, on their own, that they have done enough for today. Tension, you see, is not the enemy. It is information. It is your body's way of saying, I have been paying attention, and tonight, you have permission to stop paying attention, to let the facts drift past like clouds in a slow sky, to let your body hear what it needs to hear, and to let the rest dissolve into the quiet. You do not need to remember any of this. You do not need to take notes. You do not need to stay in any particular position, or breathe in any particular way, or do anything at all except be here, or not. Sleep is welcome. Distraction is welcome. Even forgetting is welcome. So wherever you are tonight, whatever surface holds you, whatever the day has left in your muscles and your mind, you are welcome here, and you are welcome to leave, into sleep, whenever you are ready. Perhaps, before we begin, you might notice where your body is right now, not to change anything, just to notice. Perhaps there is a place where you are holding something, a tightness in the jaw, a lift in the shoulders, a grip in the hands, and perhaps, as you notice it, it might soften, just slightly, like a held breath that finally finds its way out, or perhaps not, and that is perfectly fine too. Let us begin. Your muscles never fully turn off, even right now, as you lie still, as the room settles into quiet. A few fibers in each muscle maintain a whisper of tension. Scientists call this muscle tone, a baseline hum of readiness that persists even in the deepest rest. It is not effort. It is not strain. It is simply your body's way of staying gently present in the world, the way a candle flame still flickers in a room with no wind. This resting tone is regulated by your spinal cord, not your conscious mind. It operates below awareness, below intention, below thought. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen measured this tone in 2015 and found that it varies from person to person. Some bodies hum a little louder, some a little softer. Imagine a guitar string that has been tuned just enough to vibrate if touched, but not enough to make a sound on its own. That is your muscle tone tonight. Not silence, but the quietest possible note. Perhaps you might notice, right now, the places where that hum is slightly louder than it needs to be. And if any of those places would like to soften, even just a fraction, there is no rush. The body finds its own quiet in its own time. And sometimes, simply knowing that the hum exists is enough to let it fade. Just slightly. Like a sound you stop hearing once you realize it was always there. The masseter muscle in your jaw can generate up to 200 pounds of force. 200 pounds. That is roughly the weight of a grown person, concentrated into a muscle no larger than your thumb. The masseter sits on either side of your jaw, anchoring the mandible to the cheekbone. And it is, pound for pound, the strongest muscle in the human body. Researchers at Johns Hopkins measured its maximum bite force and found that it exceeds what most people would ever need, or ever consciously use. And yet, this extraordinary muscle often clenches without permission. Bruxism, the unconscious grinding or clenching of teeth, affects between 8 and 31% of the population. According to a review published in the Journal of Oral Rehabilitation, many people do it in their sleep, generating forces that can crack dental enamel, the hardest substance in the body. Imagine holding a fist so tightly that your knuckles turn white, but forgetting that you are holding it. That is what the masseter does for many of us. Night after night, holding conversations that ended hours ago, gripping decisions that have already been made. Perhaps you might notice where your jaw is resting right now. And if it would like to soften, even just a fraction, letting the teeth part, the lips close gently, the hinge of the jaw finding that quiet space where it holds nothing at all. There is a softness available to the jaw that most of us have not visited since childhood. And perhaps tonight, it might like to remember. Edmund Jacobson discovered in 1929 that a muscle cannot be anxious and relaxed at the same time. It sounds almost too simple, but this quiet observation, made by a physician at the University of Chicago, changed the way science understood the relationship between the body and the mind. Jacobson spent decades studying what he called neuromuscular tension, the subtle, persistent tightness that accompanies worry, fear, and stress. And he found something remarkable if you could bring a muscle to a state of complete relaxation. The anxiety associated with that muscle would simply dissolve. His technique, progressive muscle relaxation, involved deliberately tensing each muscle group and then releasing it. But the deeper insight was not about the technique. It was about the impossibility. The nervous system, Jacobson demonstrated, cannot sustain two contradictory signals at once. Tension and calm cannot coexist in the same fiber. It is like trying to hold water and sand in the same hand at the same time. One must eventually fall away. And perhaps that is worth knowing tonight. Not as an instruction, not as something to practice, but simply as a quiet fact. Your body already contains the mechanism for peace. It has always been there, waiting in the space between tension and release, in the pause between holding and letting go. And if any part of you would like to test that principle right now, not by effort, but by simply noticing, you might find that the noticing itself is enough. Your body contains over 650 muscles, and right now, most of them are doing absolutely nothing. 650. That is the number of skeletal muscles, the ones you can, in theory, control, woven through your frame, from the tiny stapedius in your ear to the broad latissimus dorsi across your back. They account for roughly 40% of your body weight. a vast orchestra of fibers designed for movement, expression, posture, and protection. But here is the quiet part of that number at any given moment of rest. The vast majority of these muscles are idle. They are not contracting. They are not bracing. They are simply waiting. A study published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology found that during relaxed lying, muscle activation drops to less than 2% of maximum capacity in most muscle groups. Imagine a city where most of the lights have been turned off, not because anything is wrong, but because it is night, and the city is resting. A few streetlights remain. A few windows glow. But the vast majority of the buildings are dark and still. If you would like, you could notice that most of your body is already doing the work of rest. Already quiet. Already still. The few places that remain active, perhaps the jaw, perhaps the shoulders, are simply the last lights in a city that is ready for night. And perhaps, one by one, those lights might dim. Whenever they are ready, the trapezius muscle across your upper back is sometimes called the stress muscle. It stretches from the base of your skull down to the middle of your back and out to each shoulder. A broad, diamond-shaped sheet of muscle that is one of the most superficial in the body. You can feel it right now if you reach up and touch the top of your shoulder. The trapezius lifts, rotates, and stabilizes the shoulder blade, and it is recruited in almost every upper body movement. But the trapezius has earned its nickname. Researchers have found that it responds to psychological stress even when there is no physical demand. A study at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology showed that office workers exhibited elevated trapezius tension throughout the workday, not from lifting or reaching, but simply from sitting, thinking, and worrying. The evolutionary explanation is something called the Shrug response, a remnant of the fetal position, where drawing the shoulders up protects the vulnerable neck. Your trapezius still performs this ancient gesture, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, bracing against threats that exist only in thought. Maybe your shoulders have drifted upward without you noticing. And perhaps they might like to melt back down, just slightly, releasing whatever invisible weight they have been carrying since morning. It is a quiet thing, the dropping of shoulders, barely visible, but the body notices, and sometimes the mind follows. Muscle tension follows a pattern scientists call bracing. Bracing is the body's anticipatory response, a tightening that occurs not because something has happened, but because something might happen. It is the tension of the email you have not yet opened, the conversation you have not yet had, the decision that sits in the back of your mind like a stone in a shoe. Researchers at the University of Queensland described bracing as a preparatory motor strategy, the body rehearsing a response to a threat that may never arrive. What makes bracing so persistent is that it operates below conscious awareness. You do not decide to brace. Your nervous system makes the decision for you, tightening the muscles of the neck, the jaw, the lower back, the hands, the areas most involved in fight or flight responses. And because the threat is often abstract, a worry, a memory, a what if, the bracing never receives the signal to stop. It is like an actor who keeps rehearsing a scene that has been cut from the play, still performing, still preparing, long after the stage has gone dark. Perhaps tonight, Your body has been bracing for something. And perhaps, now that you are here, in this quiet, in this stillness, the rehearsal can end. Not because the scene was resolved, but because the theatre has closed for the evening. And there is a particular kind of relief in that, in letting the body know that tonight there is nothing to prepare for. Fascia, the thin tissue wrapping every muscle, can thicken and tighten under prolonged stress. Fascia is the most abundant tissue in the human body. Yet until recently, it was largely ignored by science. It is a continuous web of connective tissue, translucent, strong, and flexible, that wraps around every muscle, every bone, every organ, every nerve. If you could dissolve everything in the body except the fascia, you would still see a perfect, ghostly outline of the entire human form. Researchers at the Fascia Research Congress in 2007 began to document something unexpected. Fascia responds to stress. Under prolonged tension, fascial tissue can become denser, stickier, less pliable, a process called fibrosis. The tissue that is meant to glide begins to grip. The wrapping that should be silk becomes something closer to canvas. Imagine a sweater that has been washed in water too hot. The fibers draw together. The fabric stiffens. The shape changes. That is what prolonged stress can do to the tissue that holds your muscles in place. If you would like, you could imagine your fascia softening tonight. Not through effort, but through warmth, through stillness, through the simple act of lying here, letting gravity do what no amount of stretching can, gently persuading the tissue to remember its original softness. And fascia, it turns out, is remarkably good at remembering. When given the chance, the average person clenches their jaw during sleep for about 6 seconds at a time. 6 seconds may not sound like much, but those 6 seconds can occur dozens of times per night, and each burst of clenching can generate forces far exceeding normal waking bite force. A study in the Journal of Dental Research found that nocturnal clenching episodes produce up to 6 times the force used during conscious chewing. An extraordinary effort, performed entirely without awareness. The triggers are not fully understood. Stress is the most commonly cited factor, but sleep architecture plays a role too. Clenching episodes tend to cluster during transitions between sleep stages, as if the jaw is responding to shifts in the brain's electrical landscape. Some researchers believe it is a remnant of an ancient protective reflex, the body guarding itself, even in the vulnerability of sleep. It is like a night watchman who patrols a building that has long since been emptied, still checking locks, still testing doors, long after everyone has gone home. Perhaps you might notice the weight of your jaw right now. And if you would like, you could let the lower jaw drop, just a fraction, so that the teeth no longer touch, creating a small gap, a small silence, between the upper and lower teeth. That tiny gap is enough. It is the body's way of saying the watch is over. The building is safe. Your diaphragm is a muscle shaped like a parachute. It sits at the boundary between your chest and your abdomen, a dome of muscle and tendon that flattens when you inhale and rises when you exhale. It is the primary muscle of breathing, responsible for roughly 75% of the work of each breath. And unlike most skeletal muscles, it operates both voluntarily and involuntarily. You can control it, but it will also breathe for you when you forget. When stress enters the body, the diaphragm is one of the first muscles to respond. It flattens more shallowly. It moves less freely, and breathing shifts from the belly to the chest, a pattern called thoracic breathing. Researchers at Harvard Medical School documented this shift in 2012, noting that chronic stress can essentially lock the diaphragm into a partial contraction, reducing the depth and ease of every breath. Imagine a sail that has been pulled too tight. It catches less wind, moves less freely, and the boat slows without anyone understanding why. Maybe your breathing tonight is already easy, or maybe the diaphragm is holding something, a tightness, a shallowness that has been there so long it feels normal, and if it would like to release, just slightly. If the next breath could drop a little deeper, a little lower, into the belly. There is no correct way to breathe tonight, only the way that feels most like rest. Babies have almost no residual muscle tension. Watch a sleeping infant, and you will see something remarkable. A body so completely relaxed that every limb falls exactly where gravity places it. There is no holding, no bracing, no guarding. The jaw is soft. The hands are open. The shoulders rest without effort. Scientists call this neutral resting tone, the baseline state of a nervous system that has not yet learned to anticipate danger. As we grow, we accumulate tension, not deliberately, but inevitably, through falls and fears, through postures held too long and emotions held too tight. The body learns to brace, to guard, to prepare, and slowly, the baseline shifts. What was once neutral becomes tense, and what was once relaxed becomes forgotten. A study at the University of Montreal tracked muscle tension patterns from infancy through adulthood and found that resting tone increases steadily with age. Not because of physical necessity, but because of accumulated experience. The body remembers every brace, every guard, every moment of readiness. It is like a notebook that has been written in so many times that the original blank page is barely visible underneath. Perhaps tonight, you might remember, not with your mind, but with your body, what that blankness felt like. The openness of hands that have not yet learned to grip, the softness of a jaw that has not yet learned to clench. You do not need to become that infant again. You only need to remember that the softness is still there, underneath everything. The corrugator supercilii, the tiny muscle that furrows your brow, can remain contracted for hours while you read a screen. It is a small muscle, barely 2 inches long, running just above each eyebrow. Its job, in evolutionary terms, was to shield the eyes from bright light and to signal displeasure or concentration to other humans. But in the modern world, the corrugator supercilii has found a new, perpetual occupation screens. Researchers at the Swedish Institute for Stress Medicine found that computer use triggers sustained low-level activation of the corrugator, a subtle, persistent furrowing that most people never notice. Participants in the study showed elevated brow tension throughout their workday. Even during tasks they described as enjoyable, the muscle simply contracts when the eyes focus, and it forgets to release when the task is done. It is like a curtain pulled slightly closed, not enough to block the view, but enough to change the light in the room. Perhaps your forehead has been concentrating on something your mind already let go of. And perhaps, if you notice the space between your eyebrows, that small, quiet valley, you might find that it can smooth itself out, like a lake returning to stillness after a stone has been dropped. No one is asking your brow to do anything tonight. The screen is off, the reading is done, and the curtain can open whenever it is ready. Golgi tendon organs are tiny sensors in your tendons that measure tension. Every tendon in your body, every cord that connects muscle to bone, contains these microscopic receptors. They are named after Camillo Golgi, the Italian physician who first described them in 1878. Their function is elegant and simple. They monitor how much force a muscle is producing. And when that force exceeds a certain threshold, they send an inhibitory signal through the spinal cord that causes the muscle to relax. This process is called autogenic inhibition, the body's built-in override switch. It exists to protect muscles from tearing themselves apart under excessive load. But it also means something quieter, something more comforting your body already knows how to let go. It has mechanisms designed precisely for this purpose. Sensors that detect when holding has gone on long enough, and circuits that whisper release. It is like a thermostat that senses when a room has grown too warm and quietly turns down the heat. No decision needed. No effort required. If you would like, you could trust that process tonight. Trust that your body has sensors monitoring every muscle, every tendon, every point of tension, and that those sensors are working right now, in the background, gently encouraging each fiber to find its threshold, and then to soften past it. Your body was designed for this. The letting go is not something you need to learn. It is something you can simply allow. The word relax comes from the Latin relaxare, meaning to loosen again. There is something beautiful hidden in that etymology. Re means again. Laxare means to loosen, to slacken, to let go. The word itself carries the assumption that looseness is the original state, that tension is the departure, and relaxation is the return. To relax is not to achieve something new. It is to come back to something that was always there. The Oxford English Dictionary traces the first English use of relax to the 15th century, where it appeared in medical texts describing the treatment of rigid muscles. Even then, 500 years ago, the understanding was the same. The body's natural inclination is towards softness. Tension is the exception. Ease is the rule. It is like returning to a room you have been away from for a long time and finding that everything is exactly where you left it. The furniture, the light, the quiet. Perhaps tonight is a returning, not to a place, but to a state. The state your body knew before today's effort, before this week's worry, before all the holding and bracing and gripping that life asks of us. Relaxar, to loosen again, as if the looseness was always waiting, patient and unchanged, for you to come back. Researchers have found that simply imagining a muscle relaxing can reduce measurable tension in that muscle by up to 30%. This finding, published in the journal Psychophysiology, used electromyography, small sensors placed on the skin, to measure the electrical activity of muscles in real time. Participants were asked to visualize their forearm muscles softening, melting, growing heavy. They did not move. They did not stretch. They simply imagined, and the sensors recorded a significant decrease in muscle activation. up to 30% in some subjects. The explanation lies in the motor cortex, the part of the brain that controls movement. When you imagine a muscle relaxing, the motor cortex sends attenuated signals along the same neural pathways it would use for actual movement. The muscle receives a faint echo of the command to release, and it responds, partially, gently, as if the imagination were a soft hand pressing lightly on its surface. It is like humming a song and feeling your foot begin to tap. The body listens to the mind's rehearsals, even when no performance is planned. So if you would like, you might imagine a warmth spreading through whatever part of your body feels most tense tonight. Not forcing anything, not commanding, just imagining. And perhaps the body, hearing that quiet rehearsal, might respond in its own time. With its own softening, the imagination, it seems, speaks a language that muscles understand. Your tongue weighs about 70 grams and contains 8 muscles. It is, technically, a muscular hydrostat, a structure that creates movement through the deformation of soft tissue. The same principle used by an octopus tentacle or an elephant trunk. The tongue has no bones, no joint, no rigid frame. It is pure muscle, capable of extraordinary precision, shaping every word you speak and guiding every bite you eat. But the tongue has a habit that most people never notice. It presses against the roof of the mouth during concentration. Speech pathologists call this tongue posture, and researchers at the University of Gothenburg documented the phenomenon in 2016, finding that mental effort consistently increased tongue-to-palate pressure. The tongue, it seems, participates in thinking, subtly, silently, pressing upward as if trying to help the brain form its thoughts. It is like a reader who moves their lips while reading, a remnant of the connection between language and muscle, between thought and body. Maybe your tongue is pressing against the roof of your mouth right now, and if it would like to drift down, to float in that warm, quiet space behind your lower teeth, to rest in the way a leaf rests on the surface of still water. There are no more words to form tonight, no more thoughts that need the tongue's assistance. And in that silence, the tongue can simply be still. Muscle spindles are stretch receptors that tell your brain exactly how long each muscle is. Every skeletal muscle in your body contains these tiny, specialized fibers, thin, delicate structures wrapped around the main muscle fibers like thread around a spool. They are exquisitely sensitive, capable of detecting changes in muscle length measured in fractions of a millimeter, and they report continuously, sending a constant stream of data to the spinal cord and brain about the shape and position of every part of your body. This is proprioception at its most fundamental, the sense that tells you where your arm is without looking, where your foot is without thinking. A study in the journal Experimental Brain Research estimated that muscle spindles fire between 5 and 25 times per second during normal resting tone, maintaining a quiet dialogue between body and brain that never pauses. It is like a murmured conversation between old friends, constant, familiar, requiring no effort to maintain. Perhaps you might notice that conversation happening right now, not by listening with your ears, but by feeling with your body. The quiet awareness of your arms on the surface beneath them, the weight of your legs, the angle of your neck, all of this information flowing, silently, continuously, without any need for your attention. And perhaps, knowing that this conversation is happening on its own, you can let your attention drift elsewhere or nowhere at all. Astronauts in zero gravity report that their bodies naturally curl into a fetal position. In the absence of gravity, with no external force pulling on the muscles, the body reveals its default shape. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station describe waking to find their arms floating gently upward, their knees slightly bent, their spine curved into a soft C shape. NASA calls this the neutral body posture, the position the body assumes when no force, internal or external, is acting upon it. This neutral posture was formally documented in NASA Technical Paper 3308, published in 1978. And it has informed the design of everything from spacecraft seats to spacesuits. It reveals a quiet truth, the shape your muscles default to, when freed from every obligation, is the shape of comfort, the shape of the womb. It is like a rubber band that has been stretched all day, finally returning to its original, unstretched form, not through effort, but through the simple absence of pulling. If you would like, you could imagine what zero gravity might feel like tonight. The bed beneath you holding your weight so completely that your muscles have nothing left to do. Each limb finding its own natural angle. Each joint settling into its most comfortable position. In a way, lying down in the dark is the closest most of us ever come to weightlessness. And the body knows what to do with that gift, if we let it. The psoas muscle, deep in your hip, connects your spine to your legs and is sometimes called the muscle of the soul. It is one of the deepest muscles in the body, running from the lumbar vertebrae, through the pelvis, and attaching to the top of the femur. You cannot see it. You cannot easily touch it, but you can feel it. In the way your hips tighten when you sit for too long, in the way your lower back aches after a day of stress, in the way your body curls forward when you feel afraid. Liz Koch, who has spent decades studying the psoas, describes it as a messenger of the central nervous system, a muscle that responds to emotional states as readily as physical ones. The psoas contracts during the fight-or-flight response, preparing the body to run. And in the modern world, where the threats are emails and deadlines rather than predators, the psoas can remain in a state of chronic contraction, still running from something that requires no running at all. It is like a horse that has been saddled and bridled for a ride that was cancelled, still standing at the gate, still waiting for the command to go. Perhaps your hip flexors are still sitting at today's desk, still holding today's posture, and maybe they would like to remember that they can stretch out now, with nowhere to go, nothing to run from, no gate to stand at. The ride is over. The horse can rest. Chronic muscle tension can persist even in sleep. This is one of the more sobering findings in sleep research, that the body does not always release its daytime tension when the mind enters sleep. A study published in the journal Sleep found that individuals with high levels of perceived stress showed significantly elevated muscle tension during non-REM sleep, particularly in the jaw, neck, and shoulders. The muscles, it seems, sometimes refuse to accept sleep's invitation to soften. Researchers call this sleep-related hypertonicity, a condition where the resting tone of muscles remains elevated throughout the night. It is associated with poor sleep quality, morning stiffness, and the subjective feeling of having not rested despite a full night in bed. The body sleeps, but the muscles stay awake, vigilant, guarding, bracing against something the sleeping mind can no longer name. It is like a house where the lights have been turned off, but the alarm system is still armed. Quiet on the surface, but humming with readiness underneath. Perhaps tonight can be different. Perhaps, by listening to these quiet facts, the body might receive a signal it has been waiting for. Not a command, but a permission. Permission to disarm. Permission to trust the dark. Permission to let the alarm system rest. Just for tonight. And your body has been waiting for that permission. Perhaps longer than you know. Your facial muscles can hold over 10,000 different expressions. And yet the most restful face has almost no expression at all. The human face contains 43 muscles, capable of producing a range of expressions that far exceeds any other species. Paul Ekman, the psychologist who mapped these expressions in the 1970s, identified over 10,000 distinct combinations, each one a unique signal, a unique message sent to the world about what we feel. But the face also carries a cost. Many of these muscles activate unconsciously, furrowing when we concentrate, tightening when we worry, clenching when we are frustrated. A study at the University of Portsmouth found that people exhibit micro-expressions throughout the day that they are completely unaware of. Tiny contractions that accumulate into a kind of facial fatigue. The most restful face, researchers note, is one that has let go of all expression. The brow smooth, the eyes soft behind closed lids, the mouth neither smiling nor frowning, the jaw unclenched. It is the face of deep sleep, the face of a body that has forgotten it has an audience. Perhaps you might notice the muscles around your eyes right now. Those tiny fibers that have been focusing all day. And let them blur, just slightly. Let the forehead become a wide, open field. Let the cheeks settle under their own weight. No one is watching tonight. And the face, the beautiful, expressive face, can finally rest from the work of being seen. The phenomenon called residual tension means muscles can stay partially contracted for days without you sensing it. Residual tension is the ghost of effort past, a low-level contraction that lingers in a muscle long after the activity that caused it has ended. You might carry it in your shoulders from a stressful meeting on Monday, in your forearms from typing on Wednesday, in your calves from standing on Friday. And because the tension is low level, it falls below the threshold of conscious perception. You do not feel it. Your brain, overwhelmed by louder signals, simply edits it out. Researchers at the University of Zurich used sensitive electromyography equipment to detect residual tension in office workers and found that many participants maintained measurable tension in the trapezius and cervical muscles for up to 72 hours after their last work shift. The muscles had never received the signal that work was over. It is like a song stuck in your head, playing so quietly in the background that you do not notice it until someone points it out. And perhaps now that it has been pointed out, perhaps now that you know the tension might be there, the body might take the opportunity to check, to scan, gently, without urgency, and wherever it finds a place that has been holding without permission, to simply Let it know that the work ended hours ago, or days ago, or weeks ago, and it is safe to stop. Wilhelm Reich, a student of Freud, proposed in 1933 that emotional patterns become physical patterns. Reich called it character armor, the idea that the way we hold our bodies reflects the way we hold our emotions. A person who suppresses anger might develop chronic jaw tension. A person who braces against disappointment might carry rigid shoulders. A person who learned early in life to contain grief might hold a tight chest, a shallow breath, a stillness in the ribcage that has nothing to do with ribs. Reich's ideas were controversial in his time, but modern research has lent them considerable support. A study in the journal Psychosomatic Medicine found significant correlations between emotional suppression styles and specific patterns of chronic muscle tension. The body, it turns out, is an honest record of the emotions we have carried. A diary written not in words, but in the tightness of fibers and the grip of fascia. It is like tree rings, each layer telling the story of a season, each ring a record of drought or rain, cold or warmth. Perhaps your body carries a few of those rings tonight, and perhaps they do not need to be read, or understood, or resolved. Perhaps they simply need to be noticed, acknowledged, the way you might acknowledge an old friend in a crowd, and then allowed to soften in the warmth of this quiet. The armor was useful once, but tonight, there is nothing to protect against. When you hold a pen, your hand uses about 34 muscles. 34 muscles to hold a single pen, the intrinsic muscles of the hand, the lumbricals, the interossae, the thenar and hypothenar groups, work in concert with the forearm muscles to produce the precise grip pressure needed for writing. It is one of the most complex motor tasks the human body performs, requiring constant micro-adjustments in force, angle, and position. But here is the quieter observation: many of those muscles stay subtly active long after the pen has been put down. Researchers at the Technical University of Munich measured hand muscle activity in 2014 and found that after extended writing or typing sessions, the muscles of the hand maintained residual activation for up to 60 minutes. A kind of motor afterimage, as if the hand could not quite believe the task was finished. It is like the feeling of still being on a boat after you have stepped onto solid ground, the body still rocking with the memory of waves. If you would like, you could let your hands go completely still right now, letting each finger find its own weight against whatever surface holds them. Not arranged, not positioned, just resting in whatever shape feels most natural. The curl of relaxation, the openness of surrender. Your hands have done enough today. They can put everything down now. The sternocleidomastoid, the long muscle along each side of your neck, tightens whenever you lean forward. It is one of the most visible muscles in the human body. A thick cord that runs from the base of the skull behind the ear to the collarbone and sternum. Its job is to rotate and flex the head. And in the modern world, it has become one of the hardest working muscles in the body. Every time you lean toward a screen, every time you look down at a phone, every time your head drifts forward from its balanced position atop the spine, the sternocleidomastoid engages to hold the weight. And the weight is significant. The human head weighs about 11 pounds, roughly the weight of a bowling ball. A study in the journal Surgical Technology International calculated that for every inch the head moves forward, the effective weight on the neck muscles increases by approximately 10 pounds. At a 30-degree angle, a common phone viewing posture, the neck muscles are supporting the equivalent of 40 pounds. It is like carrying a bowling ball at arm's length instead of on your shoulders. The farther it drifts, the heavier it becomes. If you would like, you could let your neck find its most comfortable angle right now. The one where it does not have to hold anything at all, where the pillow or the surface beneath you takes the weight completely, and the sternocleidomastoid, that faithful, overworked muscle, can finally, truly rest. 40 pounds, set down, in an instant, without a sound. A single muscle fiber is thinner than a human hair, and yet, millions of them working together can hold the weight of your entire body upright all day. A single myofibril, the smallest contractile unit of a muscle, is roughly 1 to 2 micrometers in diameter. That is about 1/50th the width of a human hair. It is almost impossible to see with the naked eye, and yet, bundled together by the thousands into fibers, and fibers into fascicles, and fascicles into muscles, these microscopic threads produce every movement you have ever made, every step, every embrace, every breath. The collective strength of these tiny fibers is extraordinary. The quadriceps alone can generate over 1,000 newtons of force, enough to lift a small refrigerator. The heart muscle contracts over 3 billion times in an average lifetime. The diaphragm performs its parachute expansion roughly 20,000 times a day, every day, from the moment you are born until the moment you are not. It is like discovering that a spider's web, thin enough to be invisible in certain light, can hold the weight of a raindrop without breaking. And tonight, those millions of tiny fibers, the ones that held you upright, that carried you through the day, that gripped and lifted and balanced and braced, they have earned their rest, every single one of them. Perhaps you might offer them that rest now, not as a reward, but as a recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that the day's work is done, the weight has been carried, and the fibers, all millions of them, can lay down their extraordinary, invisible burden and simply be still. And as Cluster 1 draws to a close, as the language of tension begins to settle into something quieter, we drift now into the body's hidden holders, the muscles you did not know you had, the places that carry weight in ways you might not expect. There is no need to shift your attention. The facts will carry themselves. And if sleep has already found you, then the rest of these words are simply a lullaby that does not need an audience. Let us continue. Gently, into the deeper quiet. Your muscles produce heat. About 85% of your body warmth comes from muscle activity. Even now, as you lie still, tiny involuntary contractions called thermogenesis are generating warmth throughout your body. These are not the large, visible movements of exercise. They are microtremors, invisible, unconscious pulses of activity that keep your internal temperature steady at roughly 37 degrees Celsius. A study in the American Journal of Physiology found that skeletal muscle is the body's primary heat source, producing more warmth than any organ, including the brain. This means that your muscles are, in a very real sense, a furnace, a quiet, distributed furnace that burns fuel to keep you warm even when you are doing nothing. the heat you feel beneath the blankets tonight, that gentle cocoon of warmth, is largely the work of muscles you cannot see and did not ask to work. It is like discovering that the warmth of a house comes not from the fireplace alone, but from the walls themselves. Every surface quietly radiating the heat it has stored throughout the day. Perhaps you might notice that warmth now. The gentle heat where your body meets the bed. The way your own temperature creates a small climate around you. A personal atmosphere of warmth that follows you into sleep. Your muscles have been keeping you warm all day. And tonight, they will continue. Quietly, faithfully, without being asked. Fasciae contain more sensory nerve endings than muscles themselves. This discovery, presented at the International Fascia Research Congress in 2012, quietly rearranged the scientific understanding of how the body feels itself. For decades, researchers assumed that muscles were the primary source of body sensation, of pain, of stretch, of position. But when Robert Schleip and his colleagues counted the nerve endings in fascial tissue, they found something startling. Fascia is more richly innervated than the muscle it surrounds. This makes fascia, in a way, the body's largest sensory organ, a continuous sheet of feeling that extends from head to toe, monitoring pressure, tension, temperature, and movement. It is the reason a gentle massage feels like it reaches deeper than the muscle itself. It is the reason stress can feel like it lives in the tissue, not just the mind. Imagine a net spread across the ocean floor, so sensitive that it can feel the footsteps of a crab walking 3 meters away. That is your fascia, a sensing net that covers every inch of your interior landscape. And perhaps, knowing that this net is always listening, you might offer it something quieter tonight. Less tension, less urgency, just the gentle pressure of gravity, and the warmth of rest, and the soft signal that says everything is still, everything is safe. The fascia is listening, and what it hears tonight is peace. The platysma, a thin sheet of muscle across your throat, tightens when you feel anxious. It is one of the most unusual muscles in the body, a broad, thin sheet that stretches from the chest, up over the collarbone, and across the entire front of the neck to the lower jaw. Unlike most muscles, the platysma is embedded in the skin itself, not attached to bone at both ends. When it contracts, it pulls the skin of the neck downward and taut, creating vertical ridges and that familiar sensation of tightness in the throat. Researchers have linked platysma tension to the lump in the throat feeling, that sensation of something stuck, something unsaid, something held back. A study in the journal Emotion found that the platysma activates during moments of emotional suppression. When we want to speak but choose not to. When we want to cry but hold it in. When we swallow words that wanted to be free. It is like a drawstring pulled tight across the opening of a bag, holding everything inside, preventing anything from escaping. Perhaps your throat holds something tonight. A word, a sigh, a breath that wanted to be deeper. And perhaps, in the safety of this dark and this quiet, the drawstring can loosen. Just slightly. The throat can open. The breath can pass through without obstruction. There is nothing that needs to be said tonight. And in that silence, the throat can simply rest. Myofascial trigger points, commonly called knots, are patches of muscle that have forgotten how to release their contraction. Almost everyone has felt them. Those tender, hard spots in the shoulders, the neck, the lower back. They feel like small pebbles embedded in the muscle, and they can be exquisitely sensitive to pressure. The medical term is myofascial trigger point, and researchers have been studying them since Janet Travell first mapped them systematically in 1983. What makes trigger points remarkable is their mechanism. A study in the journal Current Pain and Headache Reports described them as areas where the sarcomeres, the smallest contracting units of a muscle, have locked into a shortened position. The chemical environment around these locked sarcomeres becomes acidic, inflammatory, and self-sustaining. The knot persists not because the brain is sending a signal to contract, but because the local chemistry has created a loop that no longer needs permission to continue. It is like a lock that has rusted shut. The key is no longer relevant. The mechanism has seized on its own. Perhaps you carry a few of these knots tonight. Small, persistent places where the muscle has been holding so long that it has forgotten holding is a choice. And perhaps they do not need to release tonight. Perhaps simply knowing they are there, simply acknowledging them, is enough for now. Even rust, given enough warmth and time, begins to soften. The levator scapulae, a small muscle that lifts your shoulder blade, is one of the most commonly tense muscles in office workers. It is a slender muscle, running from the top 4 vertebrae of the neck to the upper corner of the shoulder blade. Its job is simple: to elevate and rotate the scapula. But in the modern world, the levator scapulae has become a repository for stress. Every time you hunch over a keyboard, every time you hold a phone between your ear and shoulder, every time you carry a bag on one side, the levator scapulae engages. And often, it forgets to let go. A study in the journal Work found that office workers who reported high stress levels had significantly higher resting tension in the levator scapulae than those who reported low stress, even when their physical postures were identical. The muscle, it seems, responds to the mind as readily as to the body. It is like a coat hook that has been loaded with too many coats, bent under a weight it was not designed to carry, but holding on nonetheless. Maybe there is a place near the top of your shoulder blade where a quiet ache lives, a place that has been lifting, holding, supporting all day. And maybe tonight, that hook can be emptied, one coat at a time, one layer of effort at a time, until all that remains is the hook itself, light, bare, and resting. Your heart is a muscle that contracts about 100,000 times per day, and yet it never cramps, never knots, never forgets its rhythm. The heart is made of cardiac muscle, a type of muscle found nowhere else in the body. Unlike skeletal muscle, which requires conscious or reflex-driven signals to contract, cardiac muscle generates its own electrical impulses. The sinoatrial node, a cluster of cells in the upper right chamber, fires rhythmically, spreading a wave of contraction across the heart that squeezes blood into the arteries. It does this roughly 100,000 times per day, 36 million times per year, over 2.5 billion times in an average lifetime. And it never cramps. It never develops trigger points. It never braces or guards or forgets to release. Each contraction is followed by a complete relaxation, a perfect, automatic cycle of effort and ease that requires no attention, no supervision, no encouragement. It is like a bell that rings itself, perfectly, patiently, without anyone pulling the rope. Perhaps there is something comforting in that tonight, in knowing that while the skeletal muscles carry the tension of the day, the heart continues its quiet, faultless rhythm underneath, contracting and releasing, contracting and releasing. A metronome of reliability in a body that sometimes forgets how to let go. The heart has never forgotten, and tonight, perhaps the rest of the body can listen to its example. The piezoelectric effect in fascia means that when tissue is gently compressed, it generates a tiny electrical signal. Piezoelectricity was first discovered in crystals by Jacques and Pierre Curie in 1880. The word comes from the Greek piezein, meaning to press. When certain materials are compressed, they produce an electrical charge, a direct conversion of mechanical pressure into electrical information. And in 2010, researchers confirmed that collagen, the primary structural protein in fascia, exhibits this same property. This means that every time pressure is applied to your connective tissue, through touch, through gravity, through the weight of your own body against the bed, tiny electrical signals are generated within the tissue itself. These signals are thought to influence cellular behavior, promoting repair, reducing inflammation, and guiding the tissue toward its optimal state. It is like a piano that plays itself when you lean against it, the weight of your presence creating a music that only the cells can hear. Perhaps, right now, as you lie here, your fascia is generating these quiet signals. The weight of your body against the mattress, the gentle compression of tissue against tissue, all of it creating a subtle electrical conversation that says rest, repair, restore. You do not need to do anything to activate this process. Your weight is enough. Your stillness is enough. The body knows what to do with pressure. When the pressure is gentle, Tom Myers mapped fascial connections across the entire body in 2001, calling them anatomy trains. Before Myers's work, most anatomists studied muscles as individual units. The bicep here, the quadricep there, each one separate and contained. But Myers, a structural integrationist, took a different approach. He followed the fascial connections between muscles and discovered that they form continuous lines of tension that run the length of the body, from the bottom of the foot to the top of the skull, from the fingertips to the opposite hip. He identified 12 major lines, each one a chain of interconnected muscles and fascia that transmit force and information across vast distances. The superficial back line, for example, runs from the plantar fascia under the feet, up the calves, over the hamstrings, along the erector spinae, across the scalp, and ends at the brow ridge above the eyes. Tension anywhere along this line can be felt anywhere else. It is like discovering that the strings of a puppet are all connected. Pull one, and the whole body shifts. Perhaps this explains why tension in the jaw can be felt in the shoulders, why tight feet can lead to headaches, why releasing one area sometimes brings relief to another, far away, in a place you did not expect. And perhaps tonight, as one part of the body softens, the softening might travel along these hidden rails, from one station to the next, until the whole line is quiet, The iliacus and psoas together form the iliopsoas, the deepest muscle group in your body. The iliacus lines the inside of the pelvic bowl like a cupped hand. The psoas descends from the lumbar spine like a rope. Together, they form the iliopsoas, a powerful, hidden partnership that connects the upper body to the lower body, the spine to the legs, the breath to the walk. No other muscle group spans such a vast territory or bridges such fundamental structures. The iliopsoas is the primary hip flexor, the muscle that lifts your thigh toward your chest. But it also plays a role in spinal stability, breathing depth, and emotional regulation. Because of its proximity to the diaphragm and its rich innervation from the lumbar plexus, the iliopsoas responds to both physical and psychological states. It tightens when you sit, when you run, when you are afraid, and when you are sad. It is like the roots of a tree, invisible from above, but holding everything in place below the surface. Perhaps your iliopsoas has been working today, holding you in chairs, carrying you through hallways, bracing against the invisible weight of the day's emotions. And perhaps, now that you are lying down, it might feel the absence of gravity's demand and begin to lengthen, slowly, like a fist that has decided, on its own, to open. The deepest muscles are often the last to let go, but when they do, the relief is the deepest too. Jaw tension and shoulder tension are neurologically linked. Releasing one often softens the other. This connection, documented in a study at the University of Southern California, runs through the trigeminal nerve and the accessory nerve, two cranial nerves that share pathways in the brainstem. When the jaw clenches, the signal travels through shared circuits and triggers a sympathetic contraction in the upper trapezius. And when the shoulders brace, the reverse pathway activates tension in the masseter. This is why dentists often find that patients with TMJ disorder also complain of neck and shoulder pain. And it is why massage therapists report that releasing the jaw often causes an involuntary drop in the shoulders, a cascade of relaxation that flows from one linked muscle to another, like dominoes falling in the quietest possible direction. It is like two candles sharing the same wick. Blow one out, and the other grows dimmer. Perhaps you might experiment with this tonight. If you soften your jaw, just slightly, letting the teeth part, the hinge ease, you might notice something happen in your shoulders. A small drop, a small release, an echo of softening that travels from the face to the back without any instruction at all. The body is more connected than we imagine, and sometimes letting go in one place is all it takes to let go everywhere. The stapedius, inside your ear, is the smallest muscle in the body, just over 1 millimeter long. It lives inside the middle ear, attached to the stapes bone, the smallest bone in the body, which itself is smaller than a grain of rice. The stapedius has a single, specific job to dampen loud sounds. When a sudden noise occurs, the stapedius contracts reflexively, pulling the stapes away from the inner ear and reducing the vibration that reaches the cochlea. This is called the acoustic reflex, and it happens in milliseconds, faster than you can blink. But the stapedius also responds to continuous noise. In environments with sustained background sound, traffic, office chatter, the hum of appliances, the stapedius maintains a low level of contraction, subtly working to protect the delicate structures of the inner ear. A study in the journal Hearing Research found that prolonged noise exposure leads to fatigue in the stapedius, reducing its protective function over time. It is like a tiny doorman who has been standing at the entrance all day, filtering who comes in and who stays out, growing tired, but never leaving the post. Perhaps the quiet of tonight is a gift to the stapedius. No sudden sounds to brace against. No background noise to filter. Just the soft sound of this voice, and the silence between words, and the deep, protective quiet of a room at rest. Even the smallest muscle in your body deserves a break. Muscles can enter a state called spasm, an involuntary contraction that the brain did not request and cannot easily override. A spasm is a mutiny of the muscle fiber, a contraction that begins without permission and persists despite the brain's attempts to stop it. The causes vary: electrolyte imbalance, nerve irritation, overuse, or fatigue. But the experience is universal. A sudden, often painful tightening that feels as though the muscle has developed a will of its own. What makes spasms instructive is what they reveal about the nature of muscle control. We tend to think of our muscles as obedient servants, contracting when we ask, releasing when we command. But a spasm reminds us that muscles have their own local circuitry, their own reflexes, their own reasons for holding. The spinal cord can initiate contractions without consulting the brain. Local chemistry can lock a muscle into contraction without any neural signal at all. It is like a door that has swung shut in the wind. You did not close it, and now you must wait for the wind to die down before it can be opened again. Perhaps tonight, there are no spasms. Perhaps the muscles are simply tired, simply holding, simply doing what they have learned to do. And perhaps the wind has died down, and the doors can open, one by one, in their own time. The diaphragm sits directly above the psoas, which means your breathing muscle and your stress-holding muscle are neighbors. This anatomical proximity has profound implications. The diaphragm, dome-shaped and rhythmic, rises and falls with every breath. The psoas, deep and often contracted, runs directly beneath it. When the psoas tightens, from sitting, from stress, from the residue of the day's fight or flight responses, it physically restricts the diaphragm's range of motion. Breathing becomes shallower, not because the lungs are compromised, but because the breathing muscle cannot fully descend. Researchers at McGill University documented this relationship in 2016, finding a significant correlation between psoas tension and reduced diaphragmatic excursion. Participants with chronic hip flexor tightness showed up to 20% less diaphragm movement during normal breathing. It is like two neighbors sharing a wall. When one plays loud music, the other cannot sleep. When the psoas is tight, the diaphragm cannot breathe freely. Maybe your breathing has been slightly shallower today than it needed to be. And maybe, as the psoas begins to soften, as the hip flexors release their grip on the day, the diaphragm might find a little more room, a little more depth, a little more of that slow, full breath that belongs to the night. Two neighbors, finding quiet, together. Peter Levine, who studied trauma in the body, observed that animals shake after danger passes. Levine, a psychologist and biophysicist, spent years observing how animals in the wild recover from life-threatening encounters. A gazelle chased by a lion, upon reaching safety, will often stop and shake violently for several minutes, trembling from head to hoof, before calmly walking away as if nothing had happened. Levine described this in his book, Waking the Tiger, published in 1997, and proposed that the shaking is a neurological discharge, the body's way of releasing the stored energy of the fight or flight response. Humans, Levine argued, have largely lost this natural discharge mechanism. We suppress the shaking, we control the trembling, we hold the energy inside, and it becomes chronic tension, stored in the muscles, the fascia, the posture, long after the danger has passed. It is like a snow globe that has been shaken but never set down, the particles still swirling, still suspended, waiting for the stillness that would let them settle. Perhaps your body holds some of that unsettled energy tonight, not from a lion, but from a difficult conversation, a long commute, a deadline that pressed against the hours, and perhaps, in the safety of this dark, the snow globe can finally be set down. The particles can begin to drift downward, slowly, finding the bottom. No shaking required, just stillness, just time, just the quiet permission to settle. Your scalp has muscles, the occipitofrontales, and they can hold tension that radiates into headaches. The occipitofrontales is a broad, flat muscle that covers the top of the skull. It has two parts, the frontalis, over the forehead, which raises the eyebrows and wrinkles the forehead, and the occipitalis, at the back of the skull, which pulls the scalp backward. Between them, a sheet of fascia called the galea aponeurotica stretches like a drumhead across the crown of the head. When this system tenses, from stress, from screen use, from the habitual furrowing of the brow, it can create a band-like pressure around the head. This is the mechanism behind tension headaches, the most common type of headache, affecting up to 80% of the population at some point in their lives. A study in the journal Cephalalgia confirmed that people with chronic tension headaches show significantly higher resting tension in the pericranial muscles, the muscles of the scalp and forehead. It is like wearing a hat that is slightly too tight. You stop noticing it, but the pressure is always there. Perhaps your scalp is holding something tonight. A tightness at the temples, a heaviness at the back of the head, and perhaps, if you imagine that hat loosening, the band around the head widening, the scalp softening back against the pillow, the drumhead can loosen, the hat can come off, and the head can simply rest in its own weight, held by nothing but the gentle surface beneath it. Slow, sustained stretching activates the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is the body's rest and digest branch, the counterbalance to the sympathetic fight or flight system. When parasympathetic activity increases, heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, digestion resumes, and muscles relax. It is the body's built-in recovery mode, and researchers have found that slow, gentle stretching, held for 30 seconds or more, is one of the most reliable ways to activate it. A study in the Journal of Physiological Sciences measured autonomic nervous system activity during different types of stretching and found that slow, passive stretching increased heart rate variability, a marker of parasympathetic tone, by up to 15%. The key was gentleness. Aggressive stretching activated the sympathetic system instead, triggering a bracing response. Only the slow, patient kind, the kind that feels like melting rather than pulling, activated the body's rest response. It is like the difference between pushing a door open and waiting for it to open on its own. One requires force. The other requires patience. Perhaps tonight is a kind of slow stretch for the mind. No forcing. No pushing. Just these quiet facts. Held gently. One after another. Like a series of long, slow breaths for the brain. And perhaps the parasympathetic system is listening and responding with its own quiet softening. The phenomenon of armoring, muscles held tight as emotional protection, was first described clinically in 1933. Wilhelm Reich, whom we met earlier, used the term to describe what he observed in his patients, patterns of chronic muscle tension that corresponded to specific emotional defenses. A person who feared vulnerability might develop a rigid chest. A person who suppressed sadness might hold a chronically tight throat. A person who guarded against intimacy might carry tension in the pelvis and the inner thighs. Reich mapped these patterns into what he called segments, horizontal bands of tension that ring the body like the segments of a caterpillar. Each segment, he proposed, held a specific emotional charge, and releasing the muscular tension could release the emotional content held within it. Modern somatic therapy has refined Reich's ideas considerably, but the core observation remains supported by research. A study in the journal Body, Movement and Dance in Psychotherapy found that targeted muscle release techniques could trigger emotional responses. Tears, laughter, trembling, in participants who had no conscious awareness of the emotions being held. It is like opening a drawer you forgot you closed, and finding something inside that you thought you had lost. Perhaps the armoring does not need to be opened tonight. Perhaps it simply needs to be acknowledged, noticed. Perhaps the body needs to know that you see it. The holding, the guarding, the effort of protection, and that tonight, the guard can stand down. Not forever, just for tonight. Proprioception, your sense of where your body is in space, relies entirely on signals from muscles, tendon, and joints. Close your eyes and touch your nose. You can do this with remarkable accuracy, even in complete darkness, because your body has a map of itself, a constantly updated, three-dimensional model maintained by proprioceptors, sensory receptors in muscles, tendons, joints capsules, and skin. These receptors report continuously on the position, velocity, and effort of every body part, creating what neurologists call the body schema. Sir Charles Sherrington, who coined the term proprioception in 1906, called it the sixth sense, the sense without which all other movement would be impossible. Without proprioception, you would not know if your arm was raised or lowered, if your legs were crossed or straight, if your jaw was open or closed. Every movement would require visual confirmation. Every step would be a guess. It is like a GPS that runs silently in the background, so reliable that you never think about it, so constant that you forget it exists. And right now, your proprioceptors are working, quietly mapping the shape of your body against the bed, the angle of your knees, the position of your arms, the tilt of your head, all of this information flowing effortlessly, without any need for your attention. Perhaps knowing this, you can let your attention withdraw from the body entirely. The map is being maintained without you. The GPS is running, and you are free to drift wherever the quiet takes you. The multifidus muscles, tiny and deep along your spine, are often the first to weaken during prolonged sitting. The multifidi are a series of small, triangular muscles that span 1 to 3 vertebrae at a time, running the entire length of the spine from the sacrum to the neck. They are the deepest of the spinal stabilizers, closer to the bone than any other muscle group, and their primary function is to provide segmental stability. They keep each vertebra aligned with its neighbors, preventing the small, subtle slippages that can lead to pain and dysfunction. But the multifidi are exquisitely sensitive to disuse. A study in the journal Spine found that just 2 weeks of reduced activity from bed rest or prolonged sitting led to measurable atrophy of the multifidus at the lumbar level. The muscle, it seems, requires regular movement to maintain its tone. And in the modern world of sitting, it is often the first casualty. It is like the mortar between bricks, invisible, taken for granted, but essential to the wall's integrity. When it crumbles, you do not see the mortar failing. You see the wall leaning. Perhaps your multifidi have been working hard today, or perhaps they have been quiet, waiting for movement that never came. Either way, they are at rest now. The spine is supported by the surface beneath you, and these small, deep muscles can let the bed do the stabilizing tonight. The mortar can rest. The wall is lying down. A study in 2018 found that facial muscle relaxation alone could lower heart rate by an average of 5 beats per minute. The study, published in the journal Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback, asked participants to systematically relax the muscles of the face, the forehead, the jaw, the muscles around the eyes. While researchers monitored cardiovascular responses, the results were striking facial relaxation alone, without any changes in breathing or body position, produced a measurable decrease in heart rate and a corresponding increase in heart rate variability, a marker of parasympathetic activation. The mechanism runs through the trigeminal nerve, which innervates the face and has direct connections to the brainstem centers that regulate heart rate. When the face relaxes, the trigeminal nerve sends a signal that says, in effect, the threat is over, and the heart, listening, slows its pace. It is like a conductor lowering the baton. The orchestra, seeing the gesture, plays more quietly. The face leads, and the body follows. Perhaps this is the simplest relaxation technique that exists. Not a breathing exercise, not a meditation, not a practice, just letting the face be soft, letting the forehead release, letting the jaw hang, letting the eyes rest behind closed lids. Unfocused, unworking, 5 beats per minute slower, just from letting the face be still. The face you wear for the world can be set aside now, like a mask, placed gently on the bedside table. Your pelvic floor is a hammock of muscle at the base of your torso, and it often tenses in sympathy with your jaw and your hands. The pelvic floor is a group of muscles that span the bottom of the pelvis, supporting the bladder, the intestines, and the reproductive organs. It is engaged during lifting, coughing, and moments of exertion. But researchers have discovered that it also responds to emotional states, tightening during anxiety, bracing during stress, and contracting in sympathy with distant muscle groups. A study at the University of Melbourne found a significant correlation between jaw tension and pelvic floor activation. When participants clenched their jaws, pelvic floor electromyography showed a corresponding increase in activity, even though the two muscle groups are separated by the entire length of the torso. Similarly, gripping with the hands produced pelvic floor co-contraction. It is like discovering that the top floor and the basement of a building are connected by a hidden elevator. What happens at one end immediately affects the other. Perhaps you have never thought about your pelvic floor before tonight, and perhaps that is perfectly fine. It does not require your attention. But if you have already softened your jaw, and if your hands are already resting, then perhaps the pelvic floor has received the message too. Perhaps it is already beginning to ease, following the lead of its distant partners, the hidden elevator, descending into quiet. The gastrocnemius, your calf muscle, can hold tension from standing or walking that persists for hours after you lie down. The gastrocnemius is the large, two-headed muscle that forms the visible bulk of the calf. It is one of the most powerful muscles in the lower leg, responsible for pushing off the ground during walking, running, and climbing. Every step you take engages it. Every stair you climb loads it. And by the end of a day on your feet, it has contracted thousands of times. But the gastrocnemius has a long memory. A study in the Journal of Electromyography and Kinesiology found that after prolonged standing, the calf muscles maintained measurable residual tension for up to 3 hours after the participant lay down. The muscles were no longer supporting body weight, no longer pushing against the ground, but the neural pathways were still humming, still sending low-level contractile signals, as if the body had not yet received the news that the standing was over. It is like a train that has arrived at the station but keeps its engine running, still vibrating, still warm, still producing the hum of movement even though the journey is done. Perhaps your calves are still humming tonight, still carrying the echo of today's steps. And perhaps, if you notice them, those two faithful engines at the back of your legs, you might imagine the engine switching off, the vibration fading, the stillness of arrival, finally settling in. Thermal imaging shows that tense muscles are often warmer than relaxed ones. Infrared thermography, the technology used to create heat maps of the body, reveals something that the hands have always known. Tight muscles run hot. A study in the journal Thermology International found that areas of chronic muscle tension consistently displayed temperatures 1 to 2 degrees Celsius higher than surrounding tissue. The heat is generated by the metabolic activity of sustained contraction, the burning of fuel in fibers that are working when they do not need to be. This means that tension is not just felt, it is visible, at least to an infrared camera. The shoulders of a stressed person glow brighter. The jaw of a clencher radiates heat. The lower back of someone with chronic tension shines like a coal in the dark. It is like looking at a city from space at night. The brightest areas are the ones still working, still consuming energy, still burning fuel while the rest of the world sleeps. Perhaps you can imagine a thermal image of your own body right now. And perhaps, as each muscle softens, as each area of tension releases its grip, you might imagine the glow dimming, the heat dissipating, the bright spots fading to the calm, even warmth of a body at rest. A city going dark, one district at a time. The intercostal muscles between your ribs control the expansion of your chest. There are 11 pairs of them. The external intercostals, which lift the ribs during inhalation, and the internal intercostals, which compress the ribs during forced exhalation. Together, they form a lattice of muscle between each rib, expanding and contracting the chest cavity with each breath, working in concert with the diaphragm to move air in and out of the lungs. But the intercostals can become rigid when breathing is shallow for too long. A study in the journal Respiratory Physiology and Neurobiology found that chronic stress-related shallow breathing can lead to increased resting tone in the intercostal muscles, a stiffening of the rib cage that further restricts breathing depth. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. Shallow breathing stiffens the ribs. Stiff ribs limit breathing. Limited breathing increases stress. It is like a bird cage whose bars have gradually drawn closer together. The bird has less room to spread its wings, and eventually, it forgets that spreading was ever possible. Maybe your ribcage would like to expand just a little more freely tonight, as if each breath were making room for something quieter, as if the bars of the cage were slowly, gently, bending outward, giving the breath all the space it wants. There is no correct depth, only the depth that feels most like letting go. Muscle tension follows circadian rhythms. It naturally decreases in the evening. Your body's internal clock, the circadian system, governed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, regulates not just sleep and wakefulness, but also muscle tone. Research published in the journal Chronobiology International found that baseline muscle tension peaks in the mid-morning and gradually declines throughout the afternoon and evening, reaching its lowest point in the early hours of the night. This decline is driven by multiple factors: decreasing cortisol levels, increasing melatonin production, and the gradual withdrawal of sympathetic nervous system activity. The body, in essence, is already preparing itself for sleep long before you make the conscious decision to lie down. Your muscles have been softening since sunset, following a rhythm that predates electric light, alarm clocks, and the concept of bedtime itself. It is like a tide going out, slowly, imperceptibly, but inevitably. The water does not decide to recede. It simply follows the pull of the moon. And perhaps tonight, you are riding that tide, already softer than you were this morning, already quieter than you were this afternoon. The circadian rhythm doing its ancient work, drawing the tension out of your muscles the way the moon draws the ocean away from the shore. You do not need to create relaxation tonight. It is already arriving. It has been on its way. Since the sun began to set, and as the body's hidden holders begin to release their grip, as the curiosity settles into something warmer, something slower, we drift now into the science of softening, the mechanisms by which the body lets go, the quiet machinery of peace. If you are still here, you are welcome. If sleep has already carried you away, these facts will keep themselves company. They do not require an audience. They are content simply to exist in the dark, like stars that shine whether or not anyone looks up. Let us continue. Deeper. Into the softening, the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve, passes through the diaphragm and signals nearly every organ to slow down and rest. The vagus nerve is a wanderer. Its name comes from the Latin vagus, meaning wandering, and it lives up to that name. Originating in the brainstem and traveling downward through the neck, past the heart, through the diaphragm, and into the abdomen, sending branches to nearly every major organ along the way. It is the main conduit of the parasympathetic nervous system, carrying the signals that slow the heart, calm the gut, deepen the breath, and relax the muscles. Researchers have found that vagal tone, the measure of the vagus nerve's activity, is one of the strongest predictors of an individual's ability to relax. A study in the journal Biological Psychology showed that people with higher vagal tone recover more quickly from stress, fall asleep faster, and report better overall well-being. The vagus nerve, in essence, is the body's built-in relaxation highway. It is like a river that flows through every village in the valley, bringing the same message to each one: slow down. The harvest is done. The night is here. Perhaps your vagus nerve is carrying that message right now. From the brainstem, through the throat, past the heart, into the belly. A slow, continuous signal that says rest. And perhaps, as you listen to these words, the signal grows a little stronger, a little clearer, finding its way to every corner of the body. The wanderer has come home, and the message it carries is peace. Warm water immersion reduces muscle tension measurably within 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That is how quickly the body responds to warmth. A study in the journal Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine measured muscle tension using electromyography before and during warm water immersion at 38 degrees Celsius. Within 7 minutes, participants showed a significant reduction in muscle activity across all measured groups. The trapezius, the lumbar erectors, the gastrocnemius. The body did not need to be told to relax. The warmth did the telling. The mechanism is straightforward. Warmth causes vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels, which increases blood flow to the muscles, flushes metabolic waste, and reduces the sensitivity of pain receptors. At the same time, warm thermoreceptors in the skin send signals to the brain that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, creating a systemic relaxation response. It is like opening all the windows in a stuffy room. The air moves freely, the temperature equalizes, and the room breathes again. Perhaps you are not in warm water tonight, but perhaps you can imagine it, the way warmth spreads from the skin inward, reaching the muscles beneath, softening the fibers the way sunlight softens wax. Perhaps the blanket around you holds enough warmth to begin that process. A gentle, radiant heat that says to every muscle, you can let go now. 7 minutes. The body is faster at relaxing than we give it credit for. In 1962, researchers discovered that muscle tension decreases during deep slow-wave sleep. Slow-wave sleep, also called deep sleep or N3 sleep, is the stage when the brain produces its slowest electrical oscillations, delta waves, rolling at about 1 to 4 cycles per second. It is during this stage that the body performs its most intensive repair work. releasing growth hormone, consolidating immune function, and restoring the muscles and tissues that were stressed during the day. Researchers at the University of California, Los Angeles, were among the first to document the relationship between slow-wave sleep and muscle relaxation. Using electromyography recordings taken throughout the night, they found that muscle tension drops to its lowest measurable levels during deep sleep, lower than during any other stage, including light sleep and REM sleep. The body, it seems, saves its deepest relaxation for its deepest sleep. It is like a lake that is calmest not at dusk, but at midnight, when even the wind has gone to sleep. Perhaps your body is already approaching that depth tonight. Perhaps the delta waves are beginning to form, slowly, like ripples in reverse, not spreading outward, but drawing inward, pulling the surface of the mind into a deeper, stiller place. And as the waves slow, the muscles follow, deeper, quieter, into the midnight of rest. The phenomenon of tensegrity, from architecture, describes how your body maintains structure through a balance of tension and compression. The word tensegrity was coined by Buckminster Fuller in 1961. Combining tensional and integrity, it describes structures that maintain their shape not through rigid connections, but through a continuous network of tension balanced by isolated points of compression. Think of a tent. The poles push outward, the fabric pulls inward, and the balance between the two creates the structure. Your body works the same way. The bones are the compression elements, the poles, the muscles, fascia, and tendons are the tension elements. The fabric. Neither can function without the other. A study by Donald Ingber at Harvard Medical School demonstrated that this tensegrity principle operates at every scale in the body, from the architecture of individual cells to the structure of the entire skeleton. It is like a mobile hanging from a ceiling, every piece connected, every piece balanced, the whole structure swaying gently in response to even the smallest breeze. Perhaps tonight, the mobile can find its stillest point, the tension element softening just enough to let the structure rest without collapsing. The bones supported by the bed, the muscles released from their duty of holding, the whole beautiful architecture of your body finding its balance in the horizontal, the only orientation where tension is not required to maintain form. The tent is lying down, and the fabric can go slack. Tixotropy is the property of fascia that makes it softer when gently moved. Tixotropy is a property found in certain materials that become less viscous when they are stirred, shaken, or gently deformed. Honey is thixotropic. Stir it, and it flows more easily. Ketchup is thixotropic. Shake the bottle, and it pours. And fascia, the connective tissue that wraps every muscle in your body, is thixotropic too. A study in the journal Manual Therapy demonstrated that gentle, sustained movement, or even gentle sustained pressure, reduces the viscosity of fascial tissue, allowing it to glide more freely and reducing the sensation of stiffness. This is one reason why gentle stretching before bed can feel so effective, and why prolonged stillness can make the body feel stuck when you first try to move. It is like honey that has been sitting in a cold pantry, thick and resistant at first, but flowing freely once it has been warmed and stirred. Perhaps your fascia has been sitting still for a while now, and perhaps it has already begun to soften under the gentle pressure of gravity. the warmth of the blankets, the slow movements of your breath. Each inhale a tiny stirring, each exhale a tiny release, the honey of your connective tissue finding its flow without any effort from you at all. Stillness, it turns out, is its own kind of gentle movement, and the body is already responding. Your eye muscles make over 100,000 movements per day, and at night, they finally have permission to drift without purpose. The 6 extraocular muscles that control each eye are among the most active muscles in the body. They produce saccades, rapid, darting movements that shift the eye from one point of focus to another, at a rate of about 3 to 4 per second during waking hours. That adds up to over 100,000 directed movements per day, each one precisely calculated by the brainstem to bring a new point of interest into the center of the retina. A study in the journal Vision Research calculated that the extraocular muscles contract more frequently than any other skeletal muscle in the body, and that the total distance covered by eye movements in a single day is equivalent to the eye rotating over 180 degrees thousands of times. It is like a searchlight that has been scanning the horizon all day, sweeping left, sweeping right, focusing, refocusing, never resting, never looking at nothing. And tonight, the searchlight can dim, the eyes can close, and behind those lids, the muscles that have been directing, focusing, tracking, scanning all day can finally drift. Perhaps they will wander during dreams, but for now, in this space between waking and sleep, they can simply rest, unfocused, undirected, looking at nothing and finding peace in the nothing. Alpha brainwaves, between 8 and 12 cycles per second, increase when muscles relax. Alpha waves are the brain's signature of relaxed wakefulness, the electrical pattern that emerges when the mind is calm but alert, when the eyes are closed but consciousness remains. They were first recorded by Hans Berger in 1929, and they have since become one of the most studied indicators of the relaxation response. Researchers at the University of Wisconsin found a bidirectional relationship between alpha wave production and muscle tension as muscles relax. Alpha waves increase, and as alpha waves increase, muscles relax further. It is a feedback loop of calm, the brain and body trading signals of peace, each one reinforcing the other. It is like two musicians playing a duet, each one listening to the other, each one matching the other's tempo, gradually slowing together into the same quiet rhythm. Perhaps your brain is producing alpha waves right now. Perhaps, as your muscles have been softening through these facts, the brain has been responding with its own electrical softening. The sharp, fast beta waves of the day giving way to the slower, rounder alpha waves of evening. And as the alpha waves grow, the muscles soften further, and as the muscles soften, the alpha waves deepen. The duet continues. The tempo slows, and the music drifts towards silence. The suboccipital muscles at the base of your skull connect directly to the dura mater, the membrane around your brain. This is one of the most remarkable anatomical discoveries of the past 3 decades. In 1995, a research team at the University of Maryland found that the rectus capitis posterior minor, a tiny muscle at the base of the skull, has a direct fascial connection to the dura mater, the tough membrane that surrounds and protects the brain and spinal cord. This connection means that tension in the suboccipital muscles can physically tug on the membrane around the brain. The implications are profound. Chronic neck tension, particularly at the base of the skull, can create a mechanical pull on the dura mater, contributing to headaches, cognitive fog, and a generalized sense of mental tension. It is a physical link between the tension you carry in your neck and the tension you feel in your mind. It is like discovering that the strings of a marionette are attached not just to the limbs, but to the puppet's thoughts. Pull the neck, and the mind tightens too. Perhaps you might notice the base of your skull right now. That small, tender area where the neck meets the head. And perhaps, if you imagine the muscles there softening, just slightly, the membrane around your brain might soften too, the mind easing, not through thought, but through the quiet release of a few tiny muscles. The strings loosening, the puppet's thoughts going free. A muscle that has been tense for a long time may feel normal. The body recalibrates what resting means. This is perhaps the most quietly significant fact about chronic tension. You stop feeling it. The body has a mechanism called sensory adaptation, the tendency of the nervous system to reduce its response to a constant stimulus. If a muscle has been tense for days, weeks, or months, the sensory signals it produces become part of the background noise. The brain edits them out, the way it edits out the feeling of clothes against your skin. A study in the journal Clinical Neurophysiology measured muscle tension in patients with chronic neck pain and found that many of them rated their resting tension as normal or minimal, even though electromyography showed their muscles were significantly more active than those of pain-free controls. The patients had adapted. Their nervous systems had redefined normal to include a level of tension that was, by objective measures, quite high. It is like living in a house with a slightly tilted floor. After a while, you stop noticing the tilt. You adjust your balance, your gait, your posture, and one day, when you visit a house with a level floor, you feel strangely off balance. Perhaps some of your muscles have been tense for so long that the tension feels like nothing at all. And perhaps tonight, as they begin to soften, even slightly, you might feel something unexpected. Not pain, not discomfort, but a kind of unfamiliar ease, a level floor, felt for the first time in a long time. And that ease is not new. It is original. It was always there, waiting underneath the adaptation. The phenomenon of post-isometric relaxation means that after a muscle contracts fully, it naturally relaxes more deeply than before. This principle, used extensively in physical therapy and osteopathic medicine, is based on a simple neurological fact. After a sustained voluntary contraction, the muscle's resting tone temporarily decreases below its pre-contraction level. The Golgi tendon organs, sensing the high force of the contraction, send a strong inhibitory signal that lingers even after the contraction ends. A rebound effect that pushes the muscle into a deeper state of relaxation. A study in the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies confirmed that post-isometric relaxation can increase range of motion by up to 20% and reduce resting electromyographic activity by up to 35%. The effect lasts for several minutes, a window of enhanced relaxation that the body produces entirely on its own. It is like the silence that follows a loud chord, The quiet feels deeper because of what came before it. Perhaps your body has already experienced this today. In the effort of climbing stairs, in the grip of carrying something, in the tension of a long day, and perhaps now, in the aftermath of all that effort, the rebound is arriving. The deep quiet that follows the day's loud chord. Effort followed by ease. Tension followed by release. It is the body's oldest rhythm, and tonight, the release is here. Your body contains about 10 billion sensory receptors, and many of them are dedicated simply to monitoring the state of your muscles. 10 billion. That is the estimated number of sensory receptors distributed throughout the human body. In the skin, the muscles, the joints, the organs, the eyes, the ears. They are the body's input devices, constantly collecting data about the internal and external environment and sending it to the brain and spinal cord for processing. A significant proportion of these receptors, muscle spindles, Golgi tendon organs, Ruffini endings, Pacinian corpuscles, are dedicated to the musculoskeletal system. They monitor muscle length, tension, pressure, vibration, and joint position. Research in the journal Neuroscience Letters estimated that proprioceptive and mechanoreceptive signals account for over 40% of all sensory input to the central nervous system. It is like a monitoring station with 10 billion screens, and nearly half of them are showing the same channel, the body. Perhaps there is something reassuring in that tonight. Your body is being watched over, not by you, but by itself. 10 billion tiny sentinels, monitoring every fiber, every joint, every surface. And they do not require your supervision. They will continue their vigil through the night, reporting, adjusting, protecting, while you simply rest. The monitoring station never sleeps, but you can. Finnish researchers found that regular sauna use at 80 degrees Celsius reduced muscle pain scores by 40% over 8 weeks. The study, published in the Annals of Clinical Research, followed participants with chronic musculoskeletal pain through a program of regular sauna bathing. 3 sessions per week at 80 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 minutes each. After 8 weeks, participants reported a 40% reduction in muscle pain scores, along with improvements in sleep quality, mood, and overall physical function. The Finnish sauna tradition is over 2,000 years old, and modern research is beginning to understand what Finnish people have known intuitively for generations sustained. Gentle heat has a profound effect on the body. It increases blood flow, reduces cortisol, activates heat shock proteins that repair damaged tissue, and triggers a deep parasympathetic response that lowers heart rate and relaxes muscles. It is like the way the earth softens after a long, warm rain. The crust dissolves, the soil opens, and the seeds beneath the surface finally have room to breathe. Perhaps you cannot visit a sauna tonight, but perhaps the warmth of your bed is a kind of sauna. A smaller, gentler version, the body heat trapped beneath the covers, radiating back against your skin, soaking into the muscles, not 80 degrees, but enough warmth to signal the ancient pathways it is safe. It is warm. You can let go. The masseter is one of the few muscles that can generate force in multiple directions. Most skeletal muscles pull in a single direction. along the line of their fibers. But the masseter is architecturally complex, with fibers arranged in multiple layers at different angles: superficial, deep, and intermediate. This arrangement allows the masseter to produce force not only in the up-down direction of jaw closing, but also in the side-to-side direction of grinding and the forward-backward direction of jaw protrusion. This multi-directional capability is what makes the jaw so powerful and so versatile. It is also what makes bruxism so destructive. The grinding motion during sleep engages all layers of the masseter simultaneously, producing forces and directions that the teeth and temporomandibular joint were not designed to endure night after night. It is like a machine with too many settings, powerful and capable in the right context, but potentially harmful when it runs all settings at once. In the dark, without supervision. Perhaps your masseter has been running on multiple settings today, clenching during concentration, grinding during stress, shifting during thought. And perhaps tonight, all those settings can be turned off, one by one, until the jaw rests in its simplest position, slightly open, completely still. The masseter's extraordinary capability surrendered to the extraordinary simplicity of doing nothing. Reciprocal inhibition is the principle that when one muscle contracts, its opposite automatically relaxes. This elegant mechanism, first described by Sir Charles Sherrington in 1906, is one of the nervous system's most fundamental coordination strategies. When you bend your arm, the bicep contracts and the tricep automatically relaxes. When you point your foot, the calf tightens and the shin relaxes. The nervous system sends an inhibitory signal to the antagonist muscle. At the same moment, it sends an excitatory signal to the agonist, ensuring smooth, coordinated movement without co-contraction. But reciprocal inhibition also has implications for relaxation. A study in the journal Motor Control found that gently engaging a muscle can trigger a reflexive relaxation in its opposite, a principle used in certain physiotherapy techniques where patients gently contract one muscle group specifically to release another. It is like a seesaw. When one side goes up, the other naturally comes down. The balance is automatic, effortless, built into the machinery of the nervous system itself. Perhaps the body is using this principle tonight, in ways you cannot feel. As the front of the body softens against the bed, perhaps the back responds with its own release. As the chest opens, perhaps the upper back lets go. A quiet choreography of inhibition and release, playing out in the muscles, without any direction from you. The seesaw, finding its level. The body, finding its balance. Automatically, effortlessly, as it was designed to do. Slow breathing at 6 breaths per minute synchronizes heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension into a single, coherent rhythm. This phenomenon, called resonance frequency breathing or coherent breathing, was documented extensively by Stephen Porges and later by researchers at the HeartMath Institute. At approximately 6 breaths per minute, about 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, the natural oscillations of the cardiovascular system align with the rhythm of breathing, creating what scientists call baroflex resonance. Heart rate, blood pressure, and sympathetic nervous system activity begin to oscillate in synchrony, and the result is a measurable decrease in overall physiological arousal. A study in the journal Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback found that 10 minutes of resonance frequency breathing reduced muscle tension by an average of 22%, lowered blood pressure, and increased heart rate variability, all without any other intervention. It is like an orchestra that has been playing slightly out of time finally finding the same beat. The music does not change, but the coherence transforms the sound from noise into harmony. Perhaps your breathing is already slow tonight, or perhaps it is finding its own rhythm, independent of any count or instruction, and perhaps, without any effort, the heart and the breath and the muscles are beginning to align, swaying together, like three boats tied to the same dock, rocked by the same gentle wave. No counting needed. The body knows the rhythm. It has been breathing for a very long time. The tensor fasciae latae, a small muscle at the side of your hip, connects to the IT band and can hold tension from walking long after you stop. The tensor fasciae latae is a small, fusiform muscle about the size of your thumb, located at the front and side of the hip. Despite its modest size, it plays an outsized role in lower body mechanics. It tenses the iliotibial band, that long strip of fascia running down the outside of the thigh from the hip to the knee, providing lateral stability during walking and running. But the tensor fasciae latae is prone to overwork. A study in the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy found that modern movement patterns, long periods of sitting followed by bursts of walking, create a cycle of shortening and tension in the tensor fasciae latae that can persist for hours after the activity ends. The muscle, essentially, forgets that the walking is over. It is like a security guard who keeps pacing long after the building has been locked. The rounds complete, the doors checked, but the habit of walking continuing on its own. Perhaps there is a quiet tension at the side of your hip tonight, a residue of today's steps, today's walks, today's small journeys from here to there, and perhaps, lying on your back, with nowhere to walk, the tensor fasciae latae can receive the news. The building is locked. The rounds are done. The pacing can stop. Electromyography studies show that simply thinking about a stressful event increases muscle tension in the forehead and jaw within seconds. This finding, replicated across multiple studies, demonstrates the extraordinary speed and sensitivity of the mind-muscle connection. Researchers at the University of Trier asked participants to recall a stressful experience while electromyography sensors monitored the frontalis and masseter muscles. Within 3 to 5 seconds of the stressful thought, both muscle groups showed significant increases in electrical activity. The forehead furrowing, the jaw tightening, without any conscious decision to tense. The reverse is also true. When participants were asked to recall a peaceful or pleasant memory, muscle tension in the same areas decreased. The muscles, it seems, are listening to the mind's stories, responding to the narrative, acting out the emotions, regardless of whether the events are happening now or happened years ago. It is like a musician who hears a melody in their head and finds their fingers moving to play it. The body rehearsing the music of the mind, even when no instrument is present. Perhaps tonight, as the stressful thoughts of the day begin to fade, as the stories the mind has been telling grow quieter, the muscles are listening to that quieting too, responding to the new narrative, the one that says nothing is happening, nothing is urgent. There is only this dark, This warmth, this gentle voice, and the slow dissolving of the day. The musicians are putting down their instruments. The melody is ending, and silence is its own kind of music. The body's connective tissue contains water, about 68%, and dehydration can make fascia stiffer. Fascia is not just collagen and elastin, it is also water. A great deal of water. The ground substance that fills the spaces between collagen fibers is a gel-like matrix composed primarily of water bound to glycosaminoglycans, long, sugar-based molecules that act like tiny sponges. When the body is well hydrated, this ground substance is fluid and slippery, allowing fascial layers to glide smoothly over one another. But when hydration drops, the ground substance thickens. The gel becomes more viscous, the layers stick, and the tissue loses its pliability. A study in the journal Connective Tissue Research demonstrated that even mild dehydration, a loss of just 2% of body weight in water, can measurably increase fascial stiffness. It is like a sponge that has been left on the counter to dry, stiff, rigid, and resistant. But add water, and it becomes soft again, pliable, willing to bend. Perhaps your body is well hydrated tonight. Perhaps not. Either way, the fascia is doing its best with what it has. And as you lie here, still and warm, the ground substance is doing what it can to soften. The gentle pressure of gravity, the warmth of the bed, the slow rhythm of breathing, all working together to keep the tissue as fluid and forgiving as possible. The sponge, softening, slowly, in its own time. Cats spend up to 16 hours a day sleeping, and their muscle relaxation during sleep is so complete that they appear almost boneless. Watch a cat sleeping, and you will see a masterclass in the art of letting go. The limbs drape over surfaces at angles that seem to defy skeletal structure. The spine curves into impossible shapes. The head lolls with a weight that suggests complete surrender to gravity. Researchers who have studied feline sleep architecture report that cats achieve a depth of muscle relaxation during sleep that is rarely matched by other mammals. This remarkable relaxation is partly due to the cat's sleep cycle. They spend a higher proportion of their sleep time in light sleep, which paradoxically allows for more frequent transitions through the deep relaxation stages. A study in the journal Electroencephalography and Clinical Neurophysiology mapped feline sleep patterns and found that cats cycle through sleep stages approximately every 30 minutes, spending brief but frequent periods in states of profound muscular atonia. It is like a jazz musician who improvises effortlessly. The skill looks natural, but it is built on a deep, instinctive understanding of structure and release. Perhaps there is something to learn from the cat tonight. Not a technique, not a practice, just the quiet observation that a body can be both fully alive and fully soft, that bones can be present without being rigid, that the weight of the body can be given entirely to the surface beneath it, without reservation, without negotiation. The cat does not try to relax. It simply does. The phenomenon of somatic quieting describes the gradual decrease in muscle activity as the body transitions from waking to sleeping. Somatic quieting is not a technique. It is a description, a clinical term for what the body does naturally as sleep approaches, coined by researchers studying the physiology of sleep onset. It refers to the measurable, progressive decline in skeletal muscle activity that begins in the minutes before sleep and continues through the first stage of non-REM sleep. Electromyographic studies show that somatic quieting follows a predictable pattern. The facial muscles relax first, followed by the neck and shoulders, then the arms and trunk, and finally the legs. It is as though relaxation flows downward through the body, like water finding its level, starting at the top and pooling gradually at the bottom. It is like a theater dimming its lights, row by row, from the back to the front, until only the stage remains illuminated. And then the stage goes dark too. Perhaps your body is already performing this quiet ceremony. The face softening first, the neck following, the shoulders settling, the arms growing heavy, and slowly, gently, the quieting flowing downward, through the chest, the belly, the hips, the legs. You do not need to guide this process. It is already underway. The theater is dimming itself, row by row, light by light. The show is over, and the dark is welcome. Your erector spinae muscles run the entire length of your spine. 2 long columns of effort that have been holding you upright since you first learned to stand. The erector spinae is not a single muscle but a group of 3. The iliocostalis, the longissimus, and the spinalis, running in parallel columns from the sacrum at the base of the spine to the base of the skull. Together, they form the body's primary anti-gravity muscles, the ones responsible for keeping the spine erect against the constant downward pull of the earth. From the moment you stand up in the morning to the moment you lie down at night, the erector spinae are working. They contract asymmetrically to allow bending and twisting. They co-contract to stabilize the spine during lifting. And they maintain a baseline tone during sitting that prevents the torso from collapsing forward. A study in the journal Ergonomics estimated that the erector spinae are active during 90% of waking hours, one of the highest duty cycles of any muscle group in the body. It is like 2 pillars holding up a cathedral ceiling, unseen, unappreciated, but carrying the entire weight of the structure above them. And tonight, the cathedral is lying down, the ceiling is resting on the floor, and those 2 faithful pillars, the erector spinae that have held you upright through every moment of this day, can finally stand down. The weight they carried is distributed now, spread across the entire surface of the bed. The spine does not need to be held. It is being held. 2 pillars, at rest. For the first time today, gait control theory suggests that gentle touch or pressure can close the gate on pain signals. Proposed by Ronald Melzack and Patrick Wall in 1965, gait control theory revolutionized the understanding of pain. The theory suggests that the spinal cord contains a neurological gate that can either allow pain signals to pass through to the brain or block them. Non-painful sensory input, such as touch, pressure, or vibration, can activate large nerve fibers that close this gate, reducing or blocking the transmission of pain signals from smaller nerve fibers. This is why rubbing a stubbed toe brings relief, why a warm compress eases a sore muscle, why the weight of a heavy blanket can feel so profoundly comforting. The non-painful input from the pressure competes with and overrides the pain signals, closing the gate and reducing the perception of discomfort. It is like turning up the volume on a beautiful piece of music until the noise from the street outside becomes inaudible. The noise has not stopped, but the gate of attention has closed against it. Perhaps the gentle pressure of the blanket against your body is closing gates tonight. The weight of the pillow against your head, the contact of the mattress against your back, each point of gentle pressure sending a signal that says, safe, comfortable, at rest. The gates are closing, one by one, and what lies on the other side is quiet. The temporalis muscle fans across the side of your head like an open hand. It is one of the largest muscles of the face, originating from the temporal fossa, the broad, flat area of the skull above and in front of the ear, and converging into a thick tendon that attaches to the coronoid process of the mandible. When it contracts, it elevates and retracts the jaw, working in concert with the masseter to produce the force of biting and chewing. But the temporalis also clenches during stress, often without awareness. Because of its broad attachment across the side of the skull, tension in the temporalis can produce a diffuse ache across the temple and the side of the head, a common component of tension headaches. A study in the journal Pain found that patients with chronic tension headaches showed significantly higher resting electromyographic activity in the temporalis compared to headache-free controls. It is like an open hand that has been gripping the side of a cliff. The fingers spread wide, each one pressing hard against the rock, maintaining a hold that requires constant, silent effort. Perhaps you might imagine that hand releasing its grip tonight, the fingers spreading, opening, letting go of the rock, the temporalis fanning back across the skull, smooth and soft, no longer gripping, no longer pressing, no longer holding on to anything at all. The cliff is below you now. You are lying flat, and there is nothing left to grip. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, has a direct muscle-relaxing effect. Oxytocin is most commonly associated with social bonding, trust, and maternal behavior. But researchers revealed that it also has a direct effect on muscle tissue. A study in the journal Regulatory Peptides found that oxytocin receptors are present in skeletal muscle fibers, and that oxytocin administration reduced muscle tension and increased pain threshold in both human and animal subjects. Oxytocin is released during positive social interactions, hugging, holding hands, eye contact, and being in the presence of people who feel safe. It is also released during activities that evoke a sense of warmth and connection. Listening to gentle music, being in a comfortable environment, receiving care or kindness. It is like a key that opens a lock you did not know was there. The muscles responding to a signal of safety that goes deeper than words, deeper than thought, deeper than any conscious technique. Perhaps there is a trace of oxytocin in your body tonight. From a moment of kindness today, from the warmth of the bed, from the quiet companionship of this voice in the dark, and perhaps that trace is enough. Enough to soften the muscles just a little more. Enough to lower the threshold of tension just a fraction further. Connection is a muscle relaxant, and you are not alone tonight. A study in 2020 found that progressive muscle relaxation before bed improved sleep onset latency by an average of 12 minutes. 12 minutes. That is the average time saved. The difference between lying awake and falling asleep, reported in a meta-analysis published in the journal Sleep Medicine Reviews. The researchers examined 37 studies involving over 2,000 participants and found that progressive muscle relaxation, the technique developed by Edmund Jacobson nearly a century ago, consistently reduced the time it took participants to fall asleep. But the study also found something more nuanced. The relaxation did not need to be formal. Participants who simply lay still and mentally scanned their bodies for tension, gently releasing what they found, showed improvements nearly as large as those who performed the full Jacobson protocol. The key ingredient, researchers concluded, was not the technique itself, but the attention, the simple act of noticing the body, acknowledging the tension, and offering it permission to release. It is like telling a child who is pretending to be asleep that they can stop pretending now. The permission itself is the turning point. And perhaps that is what these facts have been doing tonight. Not teaching a technique, not prescribing a practice, just noticing, acknowledging, offering the body, fact by quiet fact, the permission it has been waiting for. 12 minutes closer to sleep. Or perhaps you are already there, and the permission was all you needed. And as the science of softening gives way to something even quieter, as understanding dissolves into acceptance, we arrive at the final cluster, permission to let go. These last 25 facts are not meant to teach. They are not meant to inform. They are simply meant to be here. Quiet company for the final stretch of the journey. Like lanterns along a path that leads to a door you already know how to open. If you are still awake, you are welcome. If you are drifting, you are welcome. If sleep has already taken you, then these words will wait here, like faithful friends, until you need them again. Let us continue. Into the letting go. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, directly reduces muscle excitability. Melatonin is best known for its role in regulating the circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells the body when to sleep and when to wake. But research has revealed that melatonin also has a direct effect on skeletal muscle. A study in the Journal of Pineal Research found that melatonin reduces the excitability of motor neurons, the nerve cells that tell muscles to contract, effectively turning down the volume on the signals that keep muscles active. As evening approaches and melatonin levels rise, the muscles become progressively less responsive to the background noise of the nervous system. The twitches slow, the bracing diminishes, the resting tone decreases. It is as though melatonin gently places a hand over each muscle and whispers enough. The day is done. It is like a dimmer switch being turned slowly down, the light fading not all at once, but in a gradual, imperceptible descent toward dark. Perhaps melatonin is already at work in your body tonight, rising quietly in the blood, reaching the muscles, dampening the signals, preparing every fiber for the stillness of sleep. You do not need to take it. You do not need to think about it. It is being produced right now, in the pineal gland, a structure no larger than a grain of rice, deep in the center of your brain. A grain of rice, preparing your entire body for rest. The body's engineering is extraordinary and extraordinarily quiet. The word muscle comes from the Latin musculus, meaning little mouse. The Romans, watching a bicep flex beneath the skin, thought it looked like a small mouse running back and forth under a blanket, and so they named it musculus, little mouse. The word traveled through Old French as muscle and arrived in English largely unchanged. carrying its tiny, endearing origin with it across 2 millennia. There is something charming about this etymology. The muscles that carry us through the day, that lift and grip and hold and brace, were named after something small, soft, and timid. A creature that hides, a creature that runs, a creature that, when it feels safe, curls into a ball and sleeps. It is like discovering that the word for warrior originally meant one who sits by the fire, a reminder that even the strongest things carry the memory of softness within them. Perhaps your little mice are tired tonight. They have been running all day, under the skin of your arms, your legs, your back, your jaw, and perhaps now, in the warmth of this blanket, in the safety of this dark, they can stop running, curl up, close their small, bright eyes, and sleep the way only small, soft things can. During REM sleep, your brain sends signals that temporarily paralyze most voluntary muscles. This phenomenon, called REM atonia, is one of the most remarkable features of human sleep. During rapid eye movement sleep, the stage associated with vivid dreaming, the brainstem sends inhibitory signals through the spinal cord that effectively disconnect the voluntary muscles from the motor commands of the dreaming brain. The result is a temporary, reversible paralysis of nearly every skeletal muscle in the body. The evolutionary purpose is clear without atonia. You would physically act out your dreams. You would run, reach, fight, and flee in your bed, endangering yourself and others. Atonia is the body's elegant solution, allowing the mind to dream freely while the body remains still and safe. A study in the journal Neuron mapped the specific neural circuits involved in REM atonia and found that the process is remarkably precise. The diaphragm continues to function, ensuring breathing. The eye muscles remain active, producing the rapid eye movements that give the stage its name. But everything else goes quiet. It is like a projectionist who dims the house lights and locks the theater doors before starting the film, ensuring that the audience stays seated, still and safe while the story unfolds on the screen. Perhaps your body is moving toward that moment tonight, the moment when the brainstem takes over, gently locking each muscle group into stillness, preparing the stage for dreams. You do not need to participate. You only need to let it happen. The projectionist knows the routine. The lights are dimming, the doors are closing, and the show is about to begin. The phenomenon of sleep starts, or hypnic jerks, those sudden twitches as you fall asleep, may be the last voluntary muscle signals before atonia takes over. Almost everyone has experienced a hypnic jerk, that sudden, involuntary twitch or jolt that occurs in the transition between wakefulness and sleep, sometimes accompanied by a sensation of falling, sometimes by a flash of light or a sudden sound. The hypnic jerk is one of the most common and least understood phenomena of sleep onset. One theory, proposed by researchers at the University of Colorado, suggests that hypnic jerks represent the final volley of voluntary motor signals, the last messages from the waking motor cortex before the brainstem's sleep onset inhibition takes full effect. It is the body's transition point, the moment when voluntary control is handed over to the sleeping brain. It is like the last flicker of a candle before it goes out. A brief, bright flash, and then the smooth, unbroken dark. if a hypnic jerk visits you tonight, there is no need for alarm. It is simply the body crossing the threshold, the last voluntary gesture before the involuntary quiet of sleep takes over. A twitch, a flutter, and then stillness. The candle has flickered, and the dark is warm. Gravity itself is a form of gentle, constant pressure on your muscles, and lying down removes about 80% of that load. When you stand, your anti-gravity muscles, the erectus spinae, the quadriceps, the gluteals, the calves, work continuously to keep you upright. The total muscular effort required to maintain an upright posture has been estimated at approximately 20% of resting metabolic rate. That is a significant amount of energy, expended continuously, from the moment you rise in the morning to the moment you lie down at night. Lying down redistributes this load almost entirely to the surface beneath you. A study in the journal Ergonomics calculated that the supine position reduces anti-gravity muscle activation by approximately 80% compared to standing. The muscles are still there, still capable, still maintaining their minimal resting tone. But the work, the constant, invisible work of fighting gravity, is done. It is like setting down a backpack you have been wearing so long you forgot it was there. The relief is not dramatic. It is not sharp. It is more like a slow exhale. The body suddenly aware of a weight it had stopped noticing, now absent. Perhaps you are feeling that absence now. The lightness of a body no longer working against the earth. The quiet luxury of horizontal rest. 80% of the muscular work of the day, set down in an instant. The backpack removed, the body unburdened, and gravity, the force that demanded so much effort all day, is now the gentlest of companions, pressing you softly into the mattress, asking nothing in return. Your body replaces muscle cells on a cycle of about 7 to 15 years. The tension you carry today lives in fibers that did not exist a decade ago. Every muscle cell in your body is continuously being broken down and rebuilt, a process called turnover, at a rate that means the entire muscular system is replaced roughly every 7 to 15 years, depending on the muscle group and the individual's activity level. A study using carbon-14 dating, published in the journal Cell, confirmed that skeletal muscle cells have a finite lifespan, after which they are replaced by new cells generated from satellite cells. Resident stem cells that live on the surface of each muscle fiber. The old cells are absorbed, their components recycled, and new fibers take their place. It is like a ship that has been at sea so long that every plank has been replaced, and yet it is still, somehow, the same ship. Perhaps there is something freeing in that thought tonight. The tension you carry is not permanent. It is not written in stone. It is written in cells that will be replaced, in fibers that will be renewed, in tissue that is, even now, in the slow process of becoming new. The body remakes itself, and each remaking is an opportunity to rebuild without the tension, without the bracing, without the holding, to start, in some small way, from softness again. The piriformis, a small muscle deep in your buttock, sits directly over the sciatic nerve. The piriformis is a flat, pear-shaped muscle. Its name comes from the Latin pirum, meaning pear, that originates from the sacrum and inserts into the top of the femur. It is a lateral rotator of the hip, turning the thigh outward when you walk. But its most notable anatomical feature is its relationship to the sciatic nerve, the largest and longest nerve in the body. In most people, the sciatic nerve passes directly beneath the piriformis. In about 15 to 20% of the population, the nerve actually passes through the muscle itself. When the piriformis tightens, from sitting, from stress, from overuse, it can compress the sciatic nerve, creating pain, tingling, or numbness that can radiate all the way down the leg to the foot. It is like a garden hose with a rock sitting on top of it. The water still flows, but not as freely, not as easily. Perhaps the piriformis can release its weight tonight. Perhaps, lying down, with the hip open and the legs at rest, the pear-shaped muscle can soften around the nerve it has been pressing against. The rock lifting off the hose, the water flowing freely again. Deep in the body, a small release, but felt, perhaps, all the way to the toes. Elephants can sleep standing up by locking their leg joints. But when they feel truly safe, they lie down completely. Elephants have evolved a passive locking mechanism in their leg joints called a stay apparatus that allows them to remain upright with minimal muscular effort. In the wild, this adaptation allows them to sleep while standing, ready to move at a moment's notice if a predator approaches. Standing sleep, for an elephant, is the sleep of vigilance, the body resting, but the muscles ready. But researchers observing elephants in protected sanctuaries have documented something moving when elephants feel truly safe, when the herd is settled, when the territory is secure, when the night is calm. They lie down, they lower their massive bodies to the earth, roll onto their sides, and sleep with a depth and stillness that standing sleep never allows. A study in the journal PLOS One recorded that sanctuary elephants spent significantly more time in recumbent sleep than their wild counterparts. It is like a soldier who finally removes the armor, not because the war is over, but because this place, this night, this company is safe enough. Perhaps you are lying down tonight because you feel safe enough. Perhaps the bed is your sanctuary, and the darkness is your herd, and the quiet is the signal that says you can stop standing. You can stop locking your joints. You can surrender your weight, all of it, to the earth. The elephant lies down, and the earth holds it, all of it, without strain. The phenomenon of muscle guarding, the body's protective tightening around an injury, sometimes continues long after healing is complete. Muscle guarding is a reflexive response to pain or injury. When tissue is damaged, the surrounding muscles contract involuntarily, creating a splint of tension that immobilizes the area and prevents further harm. It is an intelligent, protective response, the body's way of wrapping its own wound in a brace made of living tissue. But guarding can persist long after the injury has healed. A study in the journal Pain found that patients who had recovered from acute back injuries showed sustained elevation of paraspinal muscle tension for an average of 6 months after tissue healing was complete. The muscles were still guarding a wound that no longer existed, a memory of pain written in fibers that had outlived its purpose. It is like a bandage that has been left on so long it has become part of the skin, no longer needed, but so familiar that removing it feels like removing a piece of yourself. Perhaps your body is guarding something tonight, an old injury, an old pain, an old fear that the damage might return. And perhaps, in the safety of this moment, the guard can be relieved. Not by force, not by pulling the bandage off, just by knowing, quietly, gently, that the wound has healed, the body is whole, and the guarding was brave, and it is no longer needed. Delta brainwaves, the slowest waves, are associated with the deepest relaxation of both mind and muscle. Delta waves oscillate between half a cycle and 4 cycles per second, so slow that each wave takes between a quarter of a second and 2 full seconds to complete. They are the dominant brainwave pattern during deep, dreamless sleep, the stage when the body performs its most intensive restoration and the muscles reach their lowest level of activity. A study in the journal Sleep Research measured the correlation between delta wave power and muscle tension and found an almost inverse relationship. As delta waves increased in amplitude and duration, muscle tension decreased proportionally. The deeper the brain sleeps, the more completely the muscles release. It is like the ocean in the deepest hour of night. The surface still, the currents slow, the fish resting motionless in the dark water, suspended between one breath and the next. Perhaps the delta waves are approaching. Perhaps they are already here, moving slowly through the brain like long, low swells across a calm sea. And with each wave, the muscles release a little more, a little deeper, a little closer to the absolute stillness that only deep sleep can provide. The ocean is going quiet, and the fish are settling into the dark. The serratus anterior, the muscle along your ribs that helps you reach forward, often holds the tension of arms extended toward screens all day. The serratus anterior is a fan-shaped muscle that originates from the first 8 or 9 ribs and inserts along the inner border of the shoulder blade. Its primary function is to protract the scapula, pulling it forward and around the rib cage, and to stabilize it during reaching and pushing movements. It is sometimes called the boxer's muscle because it is heavily engaged during punching. But in the modern world, the serratus anterior is more likely to be the typist's muscle or the driver's muscle. Any activity that involves reaching the arms forward, typing, driving, cooking, scrolling through a phone, engages the serratus anterior, and after hours of sustained forward reaching, the muscle can develop a persistent tension that contributes to rounded shoulders and upper back discomfort. It is like a rubber band that has been stretched in one direction for so long that it forgets it can spring back. Perhaps your serratus anterior has been reaching forward all day, toward a keyboard, toward a steering wheel, toward the small, bright screen that pulls the arms forward like a magnet. And perhaps tonight, with nowhere to reach, with nothing to push, the rubber band can spring back. The shoulder blades can settle toward the spine. The ribs can close. Reach complete. Arms at rest. The boxer has left the ring. In Japanese, there is a concept called Datsuroku, the art of controlled relaxation in martial arts. Datsuroku is the deliberate release of unnecessary muscular tension while maintaining structural integrity and readiness. It is considered one of the highest skills in traditional martial arts. The ability to be completely relaxed and completely prepared at the same time. Masters of Aikido and Judo describe Datsuroku as the state where the body is soft but not limp, alert but not tense, ready but not bracing. The concept challenges a common assumption that relaxation and readiness are opposites. Datsuroku suggests that they are, in fact, partners, that the most powerful state is not maximum tension or maximum relaxation, but the precise balance between the two, the state where the body uses exactly the amount of tension it needs, and not one fiber more. It is like a cat watching a butterfly, completely still, completely relaxed, and yet capable of explosive movement in an instant. The stillness is not passivity, it is potential. Perhaps tonight, you are practicing a kind of Datsuroku, not the martial artist's version, but the sleeper's version, the body relaxed, the muscles softened, but the systems of survival still running quietly in the background, the heart beating, the lungs breathing, the immune system patrolling, relaxation and readiness, coexisting, softness and strength, sharing the same body, the highest skill, and you are performing it simply by lying here. Newborns have a grasp reflex so strong they can support their own weight. Place your finger in a newborn's palm, and the tiny hand will close around it with surprising force. This is the palmar grasp reflex, a primitive reflex present from birth that allows the infant to grip strongly enough to support their own body weight if suspended. It is a remnant of our primate ancestry, when infants needed to cling to their mothers for survival. The reflex typically fades between 4 and 6 months of age, replaced by voluntary grasping, the conscious decision to hold and release. But the transition is instructive. The first motor skill a human being develops is not reaching, not pointing, not waving. It is gripping. And then, over months, the equally difficult skill of letting go. It is like learning that the first word you ever spoke was not mama or papa, but hold, and that all of language since has been, in some way, a variation on the theme of holding and releasing. Perhaps your hands are holding something tonight, not a physical object, but a residual grip, the echo of everything you held today. Every handle, every phone, every steering wheel, every pen, and perhaps, like the infant learning to open the hand, you can release that grip, finger by finger, slowly, not because the holding was wrong, but because the holding is done. The reflex was useful once, but tonight, the greater skill is letting go. The pharyngeal muscles in your throat relax during sleep, which is why breathing sounds different when you are deeply resting. The pharynx, the muscular tube that connects the nasal cavity and mouth to the larynx and esophagus, is held open during waking hours by a group of dilator muscles. These muscles maintain the airway's patency, ensuring that air flows freely during breathing. But as sleep deepens, these muscles relax, and the pharyngeal space narrows slightly. This narrowing is responsible for the softer, more audible breathing sounds of sleep, the gentle sighs, the deeper resonance, the occasional soft sound that signals a body in deep rest. In most people, this narrowing is mild and harmless, a natural part of the transition from the alertness of waking to the surrender of sleep. It is like a hallway that becomes slightly narrower at night. The walls have not moved, but the space feels more intimate, more enclosed, more sheltering. Perhaps your throat is already beginning to relax, the muscles of the pharynx softening, the airway finding its sleeping shape, and the breath passing through that slightly narrower space with a sound that is softer, slower, more resonant than the breath of the day. The hallway is narrowing, not to confine you, but to hold you more closely. Magnesium helps regulate muscle contraction by blocking excess calcium at the cellular level. At the molecular level, muscle contraction is driven by calcium ions. When a nerve signal reaches a muscle fiber, calcium floods into the cell, triggering the actin and myosin filaments to slide past each other and shorten the fiber. Magnesium acts as a natural calcium blocker. It competes with calcium for binding sites, preventing excessive or prolonged contraction and facilitating the return to a relaxed state. A study in the journal Magnesium Research found that individuals with low magnesium levels showed significantly higher baseline muscle tension and a higher incidence of muscle cramps and spasms. Supplementing magnesium reduced these symptoms in the majority of participants. Magnesium is found abundantly in dark chocolate, almonds, spinach, avocados, and bananas. It is also present in the water of certain mineral springs, which is one reason why soaking in mineral water has been used as a relaxation therapy for thousands of years. It is like oil in a lock mechanism. Without it, the parts grind and stick. With it, everything moves smoothly, opening and closing as it should. Perhaps your body has enough magnesium tonight. Perhaps the mechanisms of contraction and release are well-oiled and functioning smoothly. And perhaps each muscle, as it softens, is simply doing what the chemistry allows. The calcium receding, the magnesium stepping in, the fibers returning to their resting length, the lock turning smoothly, the door opening, the body at ease. Whales can dive to depths of over 1,000 meters, and their muscles store oxygen in a protein called myoglobin. Myoglobin is the muscle's own oxygen reserve, a protein that binds oxygen within the muscle fiber itself, releasing it during periods of intense demand or when external oxygen supply is limited. Whale muscles contain up to 10 times more myoglobin than human muscles, giving their flesh a characteristic deep red color and allowing them to hold their breath for up to 90 minutes during deep dives. At 1,000 meters below the surface, there is no light, no sound from above, just the enormous, still pressure of the ocean and the whale's body, moving through absolute darkness with a slow, powerful grace that requires almost no effort. The muscles burning their stored oxygen, the heart slowing to conserve energy, the entire organism surrendered to the deep. It is like a lantern that carries its own fuel, burning steadily, quietly, in a place where no other light exists. Perhaps there is something of the whale's dive in falling asleep, the descent into darkness, the slowing of the heart, the muscles drawing on their reserves, the body moving deeper and deeper, with less and less effort, into a stillness that the surface world cannot reach. And at the bottom of the dive, there is nothing but rest, and the quiet knowledge that the surface will still be there. When you are ready to rise, the phenomenon of autogenic relaxation works by simply repeating phrases like, "My arms are heavy," until the body responds. Autogenic training was developed by the German psychiatrist Johannes Schultz in 1932, building on the work of the hypnotherapist Oscar Vogt. The technique involves sitting or lying quietly and repeating a series of verbal formulas. My right arm is heavy. My right arm is warm. My heartbeat is calm and regular. My breathing is deep and even. The repetition, performed passively and without effort, gradually induces the physiological changes described in the phrases. A meta-analysis in the journal Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback reviewed over 60 studies and concluded that autogenic training produces significant reductions in muscle tension, heart rate, and anxiety, with effects comparable to progressive muscle relaxation and meditation. The mechanism appears to be a form of verbal motor priming, the words activating the same neural pathways that would be involved in the physical experience of heaviness, warmth, and calm. The body, hearing the description of relaxation, begins to produce the reality. It is like describing a sunset to someone with their eyes closed, and watching the tension in their face begin to soften, as if they could see it. Perhaps the words of these facts have been doing something similar tonight. Not through commands, but through descriptions, describing the softening, describing the warmth, describing the release, and perhaps the body, hearing these descriptions, has been quietly producing the reality. One fact at a time, the words painting a picture, the body stepping into the painting. Your intercostal muscles expand and contract your ribcage about 17,000 times per day. 17,000 breaths. That is the average for an adult at rest. Roughly 12 to 20 breaths per minute. 24 hours a day. Every day. For an entire lifetime. Each breath involves the coordinated expansion and contraction of 22 intercostal muscles, the rise and fall of the diaphragm, and the elastic recoil of the lungs. It is one of the most repetitive motor tasks the body performs, and one of the most essential. And yet, despite 17,000 repetitions per day, the muscles of breathing rarely fatigue. They are built for endurance, composed primarily of slow-twitch fibers designed for sustained, low-level activity. A study in the journal Respiratory Physiology found that the respiratory muscles maintain their function with remarkable consistency throughout the lifespan, declining only slightly with age. It is like a clock that has been ticking since the moment you were born, never wound by hand, never replaced, never stopping, just ticking steadily, faithfully, without asking for attention. And tonight, the clock continues. 17,000 ticks closer to morning. Each one a breath. Each breath a small expansion and a small release. And you do not need to count them. You do not need to guide them. They will continue on their own, as they always have, carrying you through the night on a rhythm that has never once forgotten its pace. Koalas sleep up to 22 hours a day. 22 hours. That is nearly the entire day spent in a state of rest, draped across eucalyptus branches, limbs dangling, head tilted at improbable angles. The body so completely surrendered to sleep that it is sometimes difficult to tell if the animal is resting or boneless. Koalas have evolved this extraordinary sleep pattern in response to their diet. Eucalyptus leaves are low in energy and high in toxins, requiring extended periods of metabolic rest to digest. But there is something poetic about a creature whose primary occupation is sleep, whose evolutionary strategy is not speed, not strength, not cunning, but stillness. The koala has survived for over 25 million years, not by doing more, but by doing less, by conserving, by resting, by trusting that the branch will hold. It is like a philosopher who has reached the ultimate conclusion that the highest form of action is rest. Perhaps you do not need 22 hours. Perhaps 7 or 8 will do. But perhaps the koala has something to teach you tonight. Not about sleep duration, but about sleep attitude. The complete, unquestioning surrender to the branch. The trust that gravity will hold you. The willingness to do nothing. Absolutely nothing. With complete commitment. The koala sleeps. Without apology. Without guilt. Without setting an alarm. The latissimus dorsi, the broadest muscle in the body, spans from your lower back to your upper arm. It is the body's widest muscle, originating from the thoracolumbar fascia across the lower back, sweeping up and around the torso, and inserting into the upper arm bone near the shoulder. The latissimus dorsi is responsible for pulling the arms downward and backward, climbing, rowing, swimming, and it is engaged whenever you reach overhead or carry something at your side. But the latissimus dorsi also holds tension. Its broad attachment across the lower back means that lower back tension and latissimus dorsi tension are often intertwined. A study in the journal Manual Therapy found that chronic lower back pain patients showed significantly higher resting tension in the latissimus dorsi compared to pain-free controls. It is like a cape draped across the back, wide, covering, holding everything beneath it in a single, sweeping embrace. Perhaps your cape can be set down tonight. The latissimus dorsi, that broad, faithful muscle, can release its hold across the lower back. The arms can rest at your sides, disconnected from the pulling and carrying and lifting of the day. The cape, folded, set on the chair beside the bed, and the back beneath it, bare and free. Sleep researchers have found that the transition from wakefulness to sleep involves a specific sequence of muscle relaxation. The sequence, documented in studies at Stanford University's Sleep Research Center, follows a consistent top-down pattern. The muscles of the face relax first. The brow smooths. The jaw loosens. The eyes settle behind closed lids. Then the neck and shoulders follow, the head growing heavier against the pillow. The arms grow still. The hands uncurl. The fingers find their resting weight. The trunk softens. The chest, the belly, the lower back, and finally, the legs and feet surrender their last residual tension. The entire sequence takes between 7 and 15 minutes in most individuals, though it can be shorter in those who are very tired or longer in those who carry significant tension. It is as consistent and predictable as the sequence of a sunset, the colors changing in the same order, night after night, regardless of the weather. It is like a wave retreating from the shore, pulling back from the highest point first, then drawing down the sand, and finally pulling away from the tide line entirely, leaving the beach smooth and still. Perhaps the wave is already retreating in your body, the face already smooth, the shoulders already down, the arms and hands already still, and now the wave moving through the trunk, the hips, the legs, drawing the tension away, leaving the body smooth and still behind it. The retreat is natural, it is nightly, and it is already underway. The phenomenon of tonic immobility in nature, when an animal goes completely still, is not fear, but the deepest form of neurological surrender. Tonic immobility has been observed in species ranging from insects to sharks to rabbits. It is a state of profound muscular relaxation and behavioral stillness, sometimes mistaken for death, that occurs when an animal is in a state of complete neural override. The muscles go limp, the breathing slows. The eyes may remain open but unfocused. The animal is, in a sense, surrendered, not to a predator, but to a neurological state that transcends the fight-or-flight response entirely. Researchers at the University of Rio Grande do Sul studied tonic immobility in multiple species and found that it is associated with a flood of endogenous opioids, the body's natural painkillers, and a profound activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. It is, in neurological terms, the deepest form of relaxation the body can achieve. It is like the moment in a piece of music where all the instruments stop at once. Not silence born of absence, but silence born of fullness. Every voice having said what it needed to say. And then, nothing. And the nothing is beautiful. Perhaps sleep is the human version of tonic immobility, the deepest surrender the body can offer, not to danger, but to rest, to the trust that the night will hold you, to the knowing that stillness is not vulnerability, but grace. Your muscles are approximately 60% water. 60%. More than half of the tissue that holds you upright, that carries you through the world, that grips and lifts and braces and guards, is simply water, the same substance that fills oceans, that falls as rain, that flows in rivers to the sea. Water gives muscles their elasticity, their resilience, their ability to contract and release. Without water, muscle fibers become brittle and stiff. With water, they are supple, responsive, alive. A study in the journal Muscle and Nerve confirmed that hydrated muscle tissue is significantly more pliable and less prone to injury than dehydrated tissue. It is like discovering that the strongest part of you is also the softest, that the thing that holds you up is made of the same substance that always finds the lowest point, that always flows towards stillness, that always, given the chance, becomes flat and calm. Perhaps your muscles are remembering their water tonight, remembering that beneath the tension, beneath the fibers, beneath the effort, they are mostly water, and water, left undisturbed, always finds its level, always settles, always, eventually, becomes still. Like a river that has reached the ocean, the movement becoming stillness, the effort becoming rest. There are cultures around the world where the evening ritual involves simply lying on the earth. In parts of rural India, the practice of lying on the earth in the cool of the evening is called earthing or grounding, a tradition that predates any scientific understanding of its effects. In Aboriginal Australian cultures, sleeping on the ground is both practical and spiritual, a way of maintaining connection with country, the living landscape that holds memory and meaning. In Scandinavian traditions, lying on moss-covered ground in the forest is part of the practice of friluftsliv, the open-air life. Modern research has begun to explore the physiological basis for these traditions. A study published in the Journal of Environmental and Public Health found that direct contact with the Earth's surface, which carries a mild, negative electrical charge, can reduce cortisol levels, decrease inflammation, and improve sleep quality. the researchers propose that the Earth's electrons have an antioxidant effect, neutralizing positively charged free radicals in the body. It is like plugging a device into the ground wire. The excess charge drains away, and the system returns to its natural, neutral state. Perhaps your bed is a kind of earth tonight, a surface that holds you, a ground that receives your weight. And perhaps, as you lie here, the excess charge of the day, the stress, the tension, the accumulated static of living in the modern world, is slowly, quietly draining away, returning to neutral, returning to still. The Earth has been holding bodies since the beginning of time, and it has never once complained about the weight. And perhaps the most relaxing fact of all, you do not need to do anything with any of these facts. They were never instructions. They were never assignments. They were never things to memorize, to practice, to implement, to worry about. They were always just quiet company, words offered to the dark, the way a friend might sit beside you and talk softly about nothing in particular, just to fill the space between waking and sleep with something gentle. 100 facts about the muscles that carry you through the world. 100 reminders that the body is extraordinary, in its strength, in its sensitivity, in its capacity for both holding and letting go. And 100 quiet permissions to do the thing the body has been wanting to do all day: rest. Nothing was asked of you tonight. Nothing is asked of you now. You listened, or you drifted, or you slept, and all of those responses were exactly right. The facts do not mind. They have no expectations. They are content to have existed in the quiet, whether anyone heard them or not. It is like finding a note slipped under your door that says, "You do not need to reply to this. I just wanted you to know that you are doing fine." And you are. You are doing fine. And the muscles that have carried you through this day, all 650 of them, are doing fine too. They have done their extraordinary, invisible work. And now, they can rest. All of them. All at once. All one by one. In their own time. In their own way. Nothing left to hold. And so we arrive at the end of tonight's journey. 100 facts about muscle tension. 100 quiet reminders about the body that has carried you through this day. Through its mornings and its meetings. Its walking and its sitting. Its gripping and its reaching. Its holding and its bracing. 100 small windows into the extraordinary machinery of the muscles that work for you. Always. Without being asked. Without complaint. Without rest. Until now. Imagine, if you will, a theater at the end of a long performance. The actors have taken their bows. The audience has risen and gone. The stage lights are dimming. Not all at once, but one by one. First the footlights, then the spotlights, then the house lights, row by row, section by section, until only the emergency exit signs remain. Small, green, glowing quietly in the dark. That is your body tonight. The performance is over. The actors, all 650 of them, have taken their bows. And now the lights are going down. The trapezius, dimming. The masseter, dimming. The erector spinae. The psoas. The diaphragm. The intercostals. The tiny muscles of the face and the hands and the feet. All dimming. one by one, row by row. And the emergency exit signs, those are your autonomic systems. The heart, the lungs, the immune system, the ones that never need to be told to work, that never need supervision, that will continue their quiet vigil through the night while the rest of the theater sleeps. There was never anything to fix tonight. There was never anything to solve, or practice, or achieve. There were only things to notice, and then to let drift. The tension was not a failure. It was a record of attention, a record of a body that showed up, that participated, that engaged with a world that asks a great deal of its muscles. And tonight, that record can be set down, not erased, just set down. The way you set down a book when the chapter is finished, not because you are done with the story, but because the reading can wait until morning. Perhaps, one last time, you might notice the body, not to scan for tension, not to look for places that need fixing, just to notice. The way you might notice a landscape from a train window, without judgment, without urgency, without needing to change a single thing. The landscape of your body tonight, the terrain of muscle and bone and fascia and breath, the hills and valleys and rivers of tissue that have carried you through every moment of your life, all of it here, all of it present, all of it at rest. If you would like, you could imagine warmth spreading one last time, from the center of your chest, outward, through the shoulders, down the arms, out to the fingertips, downward through the belly, the hips, the legs, the feet, upward through the throat, the face, the scalp, a warm, golden light that touches every muscle it passes, and wherever it touches, the muscle softens, not because it was told to, but because it was ready. And perhaps, as the warmth completes its journey, as it reaches the very last fiber in the very last corner of the body, you might feel something you have not felt in a long time. Not relaxation, exactly. Something deeper than that. Softness, the original softness, the one you were born with, the one that has been waiting, patient and unchanged, underneath everything. You have come back to it, and it has been here all along. Sleep well tonight. Your muscles already know the way. They have been walking toward this rest since the sun began to set, and now they have arrived. There is nowhere else to go, nothing else to hold, no one else to be. Just this body, this breath, this quiet, and the long, slow, beautiful letting go. Good night.